just committed the perfect murder. Witnesses? None. Your alibi? That's airtight. Your whole plan went off without a hitch. So what's the problem? Well, the man assigned to this murder case, and it is a murder case, is not like other detectives. He questions you, innocently at first, more probing as time passes. Seems like he knows more than he's letting on. And those questions, they never stop.
Oh, just one more thing, sir.
Oh, one more thing, sir.
There's just one other thing.
He knows, and he's always one step ahead of you. It's only a matter of time before he catches you in a lie, before he traps you.
Only one person beside myself knew this address. That was you, sir.
That's why you planted the gun. And that's why you planted the wrapping paper. And that's why you planted these paintings.
Over the remaining years of your life you'll be spending behind bars, there'll be plenty of time to question all the unforeseen holes in your plan. But don't be too hard on yourself. You're not the first murderer to go up against Lieutenant Columbo and lose. And just one more thing.
You're under arrest, sir.
I am Spencer Hendricks. This is the Boob Tube Boys, and we are proud to unveil another round of Boob Tube Boys Rewind. In this case, I get a chance to redo one of my biggest regrets in life, where I attempted to start the Boob Tube Boys, my round of hosting with Columbo back in episode 5. I get a chance to correct that. We get a chance to talk about Columbo again. Everyone wins. Am I right, Brian Vaughn?
I'm not guilty. I didn't do it.
Have you ever solved a murder or any kind of mystery?
Sure, plenty. Not in real life, but like in different games.
I figured maybe you had some kind of a strange mystery that you did get to the bottom of. Have you ever solved one involving Koopa?
Yeah, I've solved mysteries about him, like why he's constipated.
Why he's that big.
Why he's that big. Yeah, that's mostly my fault. I figured out through methods of deduction from overfeeding and telling me he's a good boy too much.
Van Lee, who is better at their job, Columbo or Reno Reigns from Renegade?
Ooh, I don't know. The problem is that I've seen Columbo be really good at his job, but I've been told so many times that Reno Reigns is good at his job. I believe it. So I think that's a tricky endeavor.
Like a true 2024 American.
I think, okay, let me put it this way. I have never once seen Reno Reigns make a kick-ass omelet, and I have seen Columbo make one, so I'm leaning Columbo, but I think it's up in the air.
It does hurt Columbo's case that he does not have anyone telling us that he's good at his job. We just kind of have to watch him in action and make that decision for ourselves.
Doesn't have a cool sidekick either. He doesn't necessarily need one.
No, I don't think
get me
he
wrong.
want one. There's a couple episodes where they try to give him one. And he's not mean to him, but he kind of ignores him. He doesn't really, as you would expect, he's not really learning much from him. So he just kind of does his own thing anyway.
Yeah, and I guess he does have that droopy dog.
That's true.
That's
Toby,
pretty good.
Toby's a good sidekick.
Toby?
Yeah, I think
I thought he just called him like dog half the time.
I could be completely making that up in my head. Maybe I thought he looked like a Toby.
I hope that's not
I'll
real.
have to look that up.
Just come up with it.
Well, so I do know a lot about Columbo, but I don't know all the little trivia, and I'm especially a sucker for the early ones like we're covering here today. So yeah, I didn't even see the entire series once it gets into season 4, season 5. Around that time, I kind of lost interest. The show's not as good then. I love the early ones. We did season 2 and 3, I think, when we did episodes 5 and 6. If you want to know more about Columbo and kind of the background of the show, you can try to listen to me garble my way through it the best that I could. This was like 3 years ago. So again, I mostly recommend not listening to those early episodes. But if you want to, and you want the background in Columbo, and you want to hear how far we've come, the three of us and the Boob Tube Boys, please go ahead and listen to those episodes. Today, since we're just doing a rewind, I'm largely just going to jump straight into the action here, into what is the very first Columbo outside of the 2 made-for-TV pilots that were more like movies that they had on before this one.
And I have to tell you, when I sat down to watch this episode that we're covering today, I accidentally started the very first one, Prescription Murder, I think it was.
That's a great one.
Holy cow. The intro's like a James Bond movie. It's so cool. And I was kind of disappointed I didn't get to watch the rest of that one. I mean, I will.
You should. I highly recommend that one.
It looked cool.
Can you imagine Columbo introducing himself like James Bond? The name's Columbo.
There is a big debate in his first name, and like the creator of the show,
Toby.
the creator of the show says that he doesn't have one.
He was
His
born without one.
badge says Frank. If you zoom in on it, you can see it, but that's like a modern day thing.
That could just be an adjective.
Yeah, the creator's like, I didn't mean for that to be the case. You couldn't zoom in 1971 or whatever.
Yeah.
So he doesn't really have a first name in canon. But the first two made-for-TV ones that were like movies are a little different. Columbo's not quite as slobby, you might have noticed, in that he looks a little cleaner.
A little
His hair
bit.
is shorter.
Life hasn't gotten to him yet in
No.
the same way it will.
It's a little different, and I guess they hadn't fully realized what the character was going to be. He pretty much starts out, though, this season one, episode, like almost all the way what he
he's
becomes.
amazing.
He's still doing the kill him with kindness, the pretending to be a dipshit kind of.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, oh, you know so much more than me. Here I am just listening to you. But the whole time, he's not.
Oh, he knows.
He's fucking with him.
There is also a method of line delivery that Peter Falk has that can't be scripted, where he mumbles through half of his sentences. Not all of the time, but it's like shorthand. In the omelet scene, he does it again later. And we'll talk about it at the time, but I was just really impressed with how fully he was embodying Columbo from moment one.
And I remember you told us, Spencer, when we covered Columbo the first time, that they kind of gave him free will, Peter Falk, to do free will to just do whatever he wanted with the character. And he would do weird things in scenes to throw off the other actors. And some of them would be jarred from it, as their characters would be in real life. Some of them, like Leonard Nimoy, brushed it right off and remained the steadfast doctor he was in his episode.
Well, he killed people, though.
True. But it's just interesting to see, like you said, Brian, how that's there from the very beginning. And even though it's not quite there, it's like 90% of the way there already. And this is the first episode, really.
You wouldn't know it wasn't all the way there if you hadn't seen future Columbo episodes, because it just seems so fleshed out.
Very true. There's a few little touches they add that they haven't gotten to yet, but mostly it's all there. The 2 episodes we did a long time ago, we got a chance to see a murderer that Columbo really liked and a murderer Columbo really hated. This guy kind of falls in the middle a little bit, but he's more towards not liking.
Yeah,
he's more towards Nimoy.
Does not like this guy.
He does. And do you guys like him? I mean,
No.
he's an asshole.
He's so arrogant.
He's just terrible. But Jack Cassidy, though, he has a great time with this.
My favorite thing to talk about with Jack Cassidy is how, well, it doesn't sound very nice, but he lit a cigarette one day in the 70s and didn't wake up because his house burned down. So that is what became of Jack Cassidy. He was the killer in 3 Columbos, which is almost as much as anyone. I looked it up today to refresh myself. There's Patrick McGowan, I believe is how you say his name. He did 4 episodes as killer parts in Columbo. Other than him, Jack Cassidy is tied for 3rd with Robert Culp. Most people didn't come back and do what Jack Cassidy has done here so many times in Columbo.
Martin Landau, I think, though, does hold the record for guest starring twice, but in one episode.
That's right. It's 2 of them. Pretty impressive for 70s technology. I don't know how they did it.
Well, I was going to ask, with Jack Cassidy and Patrick McGoohall or whatever, did they give them different costumes, or did they just look the exact same as 2 different people?
Yeah.
Like Martin Landau, I get, because he's the man of a million faces or whatever.
He was also playing twins.
That makes sense. But yeah, I don't know. That seems interesting
No,
to me.
you're just kind of supposed to think of them all as self-contained and you're not supposed to remember, oh, Jack Cassidy, he played a writer. And
no continuity there.
Yeah, there's really
By
not
design.
any for the most part.
So could you argue then that in the world of Columbo, he's only solved one case? Because each week it's new, it's
He
fresh,
doesn't
it's a new
reference
universe.
old cases. So yeah, to him, I think you're just kind of trusting that it's like he solved so many, he doesn't even have to talk about it.
Yeah, this is well into his career. It's very James Bond-like in that regard. You assume, unless told otherwise, this is mid-career James Bond when you watch a James Bond movie. Like he's got his 00 agent status, just as Columbo is a lieutenant now. So you kind of are like, okay, he's done some stuff.
A few other people in this that I want to talk about before we get into the episode. Jack Cassidy is the murderer, Ken Franklin. Really boring name for an interesting murderer guy.
Lots of first names in there. Ken, Frank, Lynn, like Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Mm-hmm.
He did Hamilton.
He did, and some other things.
He was that guy who had a hot air balloon in that Golden Compass stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
I did see the first one.
His name was like Witchety McGrubhaw, and he had a bunny. That was his partner. It was a hare.
Daniel Craig, speaking of James Bond, he's in that.
Is he?
He's in Golden Compass.
He's
in the movie.
Yeah.
They had the show that came out recently. It was really good. The movie sucked.
Yeah, the movie was bad.
Nicole Kidman.
I did see it. but I did not like it. I didn't know there was a show, or maybe I did.
It's a BBC production, and it's quite good.
Okay. Well, I'm a little more sold on it now.
Daphne Keane, she plays the main girl. She's awesome.
So you're keen on her performance?
Indeed. And then there's polar bears. That's all I remember.
Okay.
Not in Columbo. I
None
don't
of
know
was
that.
Columbo now.
I don't know
How
that.
did these things get here?
You're real big and white, like me.
Yeah, just one more thing. Quit shitting on my floor.
Would you like a seal carcass? I've got several.
It's how I get my natural smell. I don't use cologne. Mrs. Columbo says it's disgusting.
Columbo.
Apart from Jack Cassidy, we have his partner, Jim Ferris, who is played by Martin Milner. And then Jim's wife, Joanna.
Well, he looks like his name. I just got to say that real
does.
quick. Martin
Sure.
Milner.
Yeah. Joanna Ferris is his wife, played by Rosemary Forsyth. And then lastly, the great Lily Lysanka is played by Barbara Colby. And that's a side character who we will meet and also watch die later on in this episode.
I saw the name Barbara Colby, and I thought Frank Colby from Mission
Oh,
Impossible.
yeah, that
You know,
guy.
Weird-haired alien man.
I'm not going to forget Frank
Speaking of
Colby
Martin
anytime
Landau.
soon.
Yep.
It's also worth noting, guys, this episode was early Steven Spielberg. He directed this episode, and then this kind of launched him, and, Jaws was right after.
I sat down and I watched this episode. Katie, the girlfriend, was watching it with me, and it ends, and we're like, holy cow, that was fun. And then it goes, boom, Steven Spielberg. I'm like, what?
Yeah, and he was
Makes
in
sense.
his 20s. Also, it is noticeable.
You think so?
Yeah, there are several times when I was like, ooh.
Framing.
Especially like we just have watched so many TV shows where it's either perfunctory or bad that it did stand out.
The most recent Steven Spielberg thing, of course, was Sequest DSV.
Oh, yeah.
Remember, just as good as Columbo.
I know. Did he direct any of that?
No, he was just attached as an executive
They threw his
producer.
name on there because they wanted to give it some more.
Yeah.
Was the dolphin his idea?
He was the dolphin. He played it.
His acting debut.
Mhm.
I'm a star. I must come out from behind the camera. But no, not as a human.
An ape.
Actually, the very first thing we're about to do, I didn't come up with any of this myself, but I was reading an article about what Brian said actually is true, where immediately in the framing of how they present the first scene, it's very clear that someone with a good eye for directing is handling things, because they've got most of the story explained before we get to the exposition that the two characters have to have, which is kind of clunky.
Yeah.
But the director had already kind of set up everything we need before the dialogue even comes into it. So this is Murder by the Book. It was September 15th, 1971, season 1, episode 1, like we mentioned. The brief synopsis here is when one member of a mystery writing team wants to break from his less talented partner, he becomes the victim in a real-life murder mystery. So this episode opens with what I consider to be very aggressive typing. You don't really hear typing like this anymore because it's not possible, but it's an actual typewriter, and I just wrote down, we're describing Jim Ferris here, who we won't see much of because he dies. He is kind of like a stately looking guy. I guess that's the idea of who would be like a nerdy mystery writer in that time period.
Nerdy hits home for sure.
I think there was a little bit of like, what if Andy Daly ate more?
Yeah, that's fair. He is supposed to be a writer, a prolific writer.
Oh, yes.
And he's typing like an idiot would type. Like
Oh,
you would
it's
think
the
he would learn
70s.
how to do it.
They hadn't learned yet.
I guess.
Well, I'll tell you right now, I think I was faster than that when I wrote Jurassic Park 2 on a typewriter when I was 8.
Which did happen. I've heard this story before, and I know it's true. I haven't seen the actual script.
No, I don't know that it physically exists anymore, although I believe Van has seen it at one point.
While we watch Jim Ferris do his really loud typing, the same time this is happening, masterful touch by Steven Spielberg, we get to see Ken Franklin, who is Jack Cassidy, who looks very self-important from the get-go.
Yeah, and never stops even when things are looking bad for him.
Driving his is a giant 70s luxury car, some kind of town car. I don't know cars.
It's both giant and tiny. Like there's no room inside, but somehow it's massive outside. It's quantum
I
physics
feel like
don't work
maybe
there.
that was a 70s car thing. And they
Could
were like,
be.
let's put it all on the outside. We don't need anything in there.
It just looks like if I got in that car, I'd be very uncomfortable.
Probably
And yet,
true.
if you walk up to it, you'd be like, oh, you could fit a dozen clowns in that at least.
One thing I love about 70s vehicles is that they must just weigh so much. They
Oh,
just
God,
seem
yeah.
so metal, and I don't mean that in a cool way.
So as you can tell by Steven Spielberg being Steven Spielberg, these two people they're not two separate characters that aren't going to intersect. they're both headed for the same scene here. We're just getting an idea of how they are individually. Pretty effective, actually, because we get a good sense of their characters just by seeing how they are alone.
I think there's something about having the soundtrack only be the typewriter that works really well for seeing Ken and understanding he's not going to be cool, because it's kind of a weird TV movie shorthand that if you have no music or no soundtrack, when you meet a character, something's up with that person. Or maybe I just feel that way.
It really did lend to the episode, and I think improved it a lot, just by the nature of not having it. And typically, shows now, I'm going to sound like an old man, it's just nonstop wall-to-wall background music.
And this is a pilot.
Exactly. And nothing was there. It really worked.
Yeah, it was really effective and really kind of reminds you, boy, old man thing incoming, how less is more sometimes.
Well, there's a whole thing that came out very recently. I don't know if you guys read this from Netflix. Like some people who worked within the inner Netflix society have revealed that Netflix has rules where, for example, they want their characters, their writers, to make their characters come into scenes announcing what they do, because they expect the people watching the shows to be dicking around on their phone and not paying attention.
Yes, I did.
So they want to dumb things down for people. And obviously, as people who are slightly more artistic than some, I hate that. I think that's you're handcuffing people by forcing them to do stupid shit and appeal to the lowest common denominator. Fuck that.
I like to think that even casual viewer, if they read that, would feel insulted and say, well, I don't want this. And I have seen a lot of backlash from TV writers specifically who are like, this isn't what we fought for when we were striking, to write AI level shit.
Well, that's the other thing. When they did the strike, of course, when it was all solidified, it's Robert Downey Jr. who's going to be fine. It's everyone else who isn't.
Exactly.
Because they're still allowing the studios to own their likeness and everything. And anyway, the strike pissed me off because it only helped those who already were good to go.
It's just another one of those, like, a little, you gain a little bit, but the ultimate picture remains the same and obviously looking worse. And I think that this is another sign that studios not only like the idea of AI, but like the results they're seeing from dumbed down scripts.
Yep.
That totally goes against, too, what everything I've ever read about when you're creating something that you're supposed to assume a smart audience. You're not supposed to assume, like, you're really writing for the bare minimum.
Yeah, like, that's the whole thing, is that the specific becomes universal or whatever. People have to step into your world. The appeal of fiction is you're stepping into another world someone else made and getting to learn it and live in it. It's not that, like, I want to see my same dumb work job said to me by a character, and then they fall in love in the real world, and then they get married. Yeah, and that's what everything's becoming. And
Bazinga!
Yeah, and then there's that. Oh, did you guys know that there's a spin-off of Young Sheldon now?
Yeah, it's like The Neighbors or something.
Yeah, so this is going to be the third Big Bang Theory adjacent show.
If you go online and, for example, on Reddit or whatever, and you go to the Young Sheldon subreddit, which of course is filled with fans.
We're there all the time.
Those people will defend Young Sheldon. They'll be like, the Big Bang Theory was stupid, but Young Sheldon, it tugs the heartstrings. It's so smart. Hashtag doubt is what I'm going to go with here.
I've never seen
I haven't either.
Young Sheldon, but I have.
There's no way.
There's no way. I've seen The Big Bang Theory, and
I
saw one ad for Young Sheldon. And that ad, I was raising my eyebrow at it the whole time, like, this doesn't need to exist. And that was 10 years ago.
I have to continue this just to say, like, what would the thought process behind being what they nailed that Big Bang Theory did? And what would you even say that Young Sheldon figured out that made it good TV?
The thing that I've read, that I've seen people say, is that, again, it tugs at the heartstrings. It shows you a family dynamic that is real and makes you feel for it, because it's a dad who's not as smart as the kid, trying to navigate the kid's world and raise them to be a good person, but then the kid's an obnoxious little shit because he's a nerd. I don't know, but it's very much an emotional thing that they say that The Big Bang Theory was gags. Young Sheldon is smart. It's more Wonder Years than the one with Kirk Cameron.
It's just like Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, man. You just can't tell which one's better.
So as we discussed, our two characters are about to converge. What happens is, it's a little bit of a misdirect, because Brian mentioned we see Ken's face in the car. We know something's not good with him. And we're being misled to believe he's going to commit the murder right out of the gate here, because he's got a gun in his hand. He's knocking on his partner's door. The meeting starts on that note, but very quickly, we're getting the sense that's all a setup. It's a joke. He just laughs. He's not going to shoot him right now. And the two are actually seemingly on okay terms.
I like this office.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's great.
We like to talk about 70s furniture, wardrobe, hairstyles when we talk about 70s shows specifically. And this office, it's like wood paneled and something about like the shelves. There's like a giant ashtray.
Pretty cool.
There's some sort of statue of maybe Cupid. I don't know what that thing is.
It's a nice office for a creative type, and that just goes to show you right off the bat, Mrs. Melville has been successful. She has been selling.
I wanted to also mention to you guys, I thought you guys would be happy about this too. We would have been hot in the 70s, I think.
I think that's fair.
Because we'll see later that Ken, who we're meeting here in this scene, has inexplicable luck with women.
And I don't think it's solely because he's rich. It's personality.
Yeah.
And he's a 70-year-old weirdo or whatever, but
Yeah, I mean,
they love him.
He is aggressive.
I think he's like 50, but still, it's
The
the
gray
70s, you
hair.
can't tell.
Yeah, you
It's
never.
really hard
He
to
may
tell.
be 50, but if he is 50 in this episode, let me say, all respect to the dead, looks like shit. Looks older than that.
It's definitely, it's not just the money, but certainly the money is basically his personality. As we learn,
And the sideburns.
he kind of doesn't have a lot else going for him aside from his power and that he gets through his money.
He's the Erlich Bachman of this team.
He is. He's a social media star while
That is
someone
very
else
true.
writes, you know.
And before they called it that. Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe this was someone went back in time to write this because we needed to see it, guys. And maybe this is something of like the thematic resonance here is that Ken represents social media and Elon Musk and the billionaire class using their power to wield fake art against the gems of the world, the true artistes, the ones who speak the truth. And we'll find out even try to right the world's wrongs.
And get gunned down in the process.
Yes. I haven't gotten to do a stupid, not true comparison about a show in a long time.
We are.
That felt really good. I feel like I went to the bathroom.
Quickly, we get all our exposition. Speaking of the bathroom, dumped on us. It's basically whatever you couldn't pick up, it's going to be spat at the characters right now between them. This is clunky. The start of the episode is awkward because Ken's apologizing. Jim says, oh, you know, I'm one half of this writing team and I'm just glad that we're okay. And it's really, I didn't even write most of it down because we're just meeting the characters and what their deal is. But
Well, we sure did have an argument, and now you're here to make amends, right?
I would like to point out that I had to turn the captions on to see what Ken said when he apologized. It turns out he blew his cork. Is it not something that you say when you got mad? I'm sorry, I blew my cork at you earlier.
Well, this guy is popping corks left and right.
That's
It's
true.
true.
Literally, later. He starts by saying metaphorically, he popped his metaphorical cork and he got mad because Jim, understandably, like we just talked about, he's a practitioner of
He's
the written
an
word.
artiste.
Yes, and Ken is not. So he wants to, we've had a good run, you made a lot of money, now I want to do my own thing. I don't need you because you don't do anything. I'm going to write and you're going to do whatever it is you want to do from now on.
I'm probably going to write some stuff about mobsters. I don't know. Maybe.
And the thing is, their career together lasted a long time.
15 books.
They made a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have enough money to go their separate ways. Ken should be fine with that and find something else to do. He seems like he could run some sort of pyramid scheme.
So originally, Ken did not take the news well and is pretending, we know better, but he's pretending to be here today to just put a stop to all that, bury the hatchet, make amends. So Ken is already immediately in this episode beginning just a big plan of deception and lies. Immediately upon going there and apologizing, he makes him drink some champagne or something that he does to open for him. And then he says, yeah, we're going to my cabin in San Diego right now. No advance notice, just, hey, let's go drive to San Diego. You're going to my cabin.
And you know, with the champagne, I think they did a good job. And I don't know if this was intentional of making me think maybe he poisoned it, because there's a bit where Jim drinks the champagne right away. Ken doesn't. And Ken pauses and he looks at it and the camera kind of focuses on the champagne flute. And I thought, oh boy, he's probably, and then eventually he drinks it and it's fine.
That is probably true because it seems like, you know, you're already supposed to think he was going to shoot him. And now maybe you're thinking, oh, he's going to poison him. You're waiting. Like, is he going to kill him right now, right here and right now?
Those were shot really well too, those misdirects. There are even things that Ken does intentionally in this scene that the way they're shot makes them seem even like more nefarious, to where you're like, what is that? Why is he doing that?
The lighter, he leaves his lighter here and it ends up being important, but not to the degree that they focus on it.
No, and I would argue that we don't need to see that because he uses the lighter, he puts it on the desk while he's talking to Jim, and it's real subtle. He does a good job of that. So when he uses that to come back in later, he just tells Jim, hey, I left my lighter in there. He didn't really need to leave the lighter. So
I think that's
not necessary.
That is a sign of, though, him being very meticulous with this first one. And that lighter, I must say. Cool ass lighter. Looks like it weighs like a pound.
Like you have to fill that thing with butane every now and then.
Yeah, and like ketchup.
So Jim, you guys can kind of get the sense, doesn't really want to go to the cabin, but figures, I guess I will let him have this because I'm getting rid of him and I'm not going to have to deal with him anymore. So
yeah, he wants to go home to Beverly Ann Forsyth or whatever.
And Ken is, of course, trying to tug at Jim's heartstrings and be like, look, you're kicking me out. It's okay. It's not a big deal. Give me this one thing, man. This is hurting me, but I'm okay with that. But do this for me.
One more boys' night, like there's a big sense of that. Jim's kind of the more responsible, down to earth one. He just wants to get home to his wife. Whereas Ken's like, different babe every night somehow.
The other thing besides the lighter that he's hiding in the office to show you that what level Ken is operating on right now is how he casually hands Jim a piece of paper when they're on the way out, kind of in the parking lot going towards the car, and says, hey, this is a list of stuff that I need to pick up from the office. Make sure it's okay. Jim grabs it, says, well, this is just a list of names. And Ken's, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm just losing my mind. I got the wrong piece of paper. Give me that back.
Oh, senior moment.
Yeah, we'll find out later what that was. List of names. What could that be? So the two reach the car to depart. Ken notifies Jim, you know what? I really am losing my mind. It's not just the paper. I left my lighter in your office. I got to go back and grab that.
He says, I'm losing my sight. I'm losing my mind. I wish somebody would tell me I'm fine.
That's exactly what he said. So Ken goes back up there and immediately when he steps inside, starts overturning everything in the office. He's throwing books on the ground. He's opening drawers. He's throwing papers in the air. It looked like he had some fun.
He wiseaus on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is just like that.
It is a lot of wiseau in that there's a little too much restraint here.
And not enough yelling to be wiseau, though. Because wiseau, of course, went while doing it. Ken just does it.
I will say, though, Ken doesn't waste having retrieved his lighter. He immediately just lights a cigarette in the office and then smiles to himself.
So smugly. It's great.
It is nice how the way they do the shot, it looks like he's going to just like leave without the lighter and then he grabs it on the way out and then celebrates with it.
Yeah, you think that might be a clue that gets him later, but no, he retrieves it.
The other thing that we should mention he does here when he's inside the office, apart from staging this big break-in, he does neatly tuck the little list that he's just made Jim hold in his drawer as if it had been in Jim's office. So whatever this list of name is, it's planted in here for someone to find later. It turns out to be Ken, but we'll get to that when we get to that. So as the writing team approaches their destination, now that they're on their journey, Ken pulls into a small general store, which will turn out to be an important location. And he explains to Jim, hey, the store owner is a big fan of us. I'm going to go in and talk to her real quick. Hand me one of those novels. So one of the Miss Melville novels. Sorry, it is Mrs. Melville, right?
Yeah, she's married.
I thought so.
Like Mrs. Columbo.
Exactly. So he has Jim hand him one of their novels. This one it's a signed copy straight from Ken himself. It's Prescription Murder. That was the title of this one.
Like the title of the first pilot.
Exactly true.
Which mentioned Brian, and you said something along the lines of like, do you think they were like, hell yeah, we nailed it by doing that sort of thing?
I feel like they would be. I would be. I'd be like, this is a little nod that the true Columbo heads are going to get.
Like they crossed their arms and nodded.
Yeah.
And they put that in the script.
That's what I would do. One of them wrote it in the script, and then in the writer's room, I don't know if they had writer's rooms.
Just two.
One of the writers looks to the other one. They both look at the page. They both look up and nod to one another.
Maybe someone just really likes Prescription Murder and is like, I got to put that in everything I do.
Pretty good, though. Like, I'm going to write you a prescription, madam. Oh, what for? Ambien? Murder.
Wait, does that mean I can do murder?
Or that I'm going to get murder?
Yeah,
I'm
a little
sorry.
confused.
The semantics are a little off. Let me write a deeper prescription.
Are you a real doctor?
It's Leonard Nimoy.
He would prescribe murder. He loves it.
He killed Grandpa Joe. Wait, that's not right. That's from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory or whatever.
What was his name?
Zebulon.
Zebediah.
I think it was Zebulon.
I think you're right.
I really do.
But they just called him Zeb or something.
Yeah.
Or Z.
And then he died.
They didn't call him Z.
Zeb's dead, baby.
Z.
So inside, we meet store owner Lily Lasenka. I love that name. There's Ken, Jim, and Lily Lasenka.
They really said, can we get Shelley Duvall? No. Well, this will do.
Same here. This is like Kelly Duvall.
So we learn really quickly with Lily's kind of over a little overdone character that she has a huge thing for Ken. She's infatuated with him.
Look
and
at him.
she would rather have him, but she'll take his gift. He's got that book for her with that personalized signing.
This character, just think of Shelley Duvall in The Shining, but with nothing like that going on.
Right.
Just in day-to-day life, terrified and loud.
It's before she made it to that hotel. That's what this is.
So she asks Ken, well, which lucky woman, like we've been talking about, Ken's got a lot of them. Which one are you bringing to the cabin this time? Is it the blonde, the brunette, or I forget what she says, but
Is it that whore?
there's a couple different ones that he brings and she wonders which one. So Ken quickly shuts that down. He stops her because he doesn't want her looking outside and he says, it's just me this time,
Yeah,
Lily.
she starts to walk to the window and he's like, oh, no, look over here.
Not suspicious at all, Ken.
I don't know. Maybe she's just super progressive because the idea of the woman who runs this store seeing Ken bring dozens, presumably, of women to this cabin to give them the weekend of their lives, why would she still be then that invested in him?
Maybe she's not morally bothered by that.
Yeah,
These are consensual parties.
It would
right?
have to be that. It would have to be a progressive thought in that regard.
She just does still want him, She
Yeah.
doesn't mind his playboy ways. She just wants to be included.
Later on, we kind of get a sense that maybe she doesn't want anything serious because she's a widow.
Right.
And maybe she still loves her husband and honestly would just like to have the experience, the tour.
Good call.
And that's it.
That being added later, I felt was like a necessary infusion to her character to
Yeah.
make her not seem like a total idiot.
Yeah, we don't know much about her at this part of the show. It's just kind of, she seems a little bit unhinged,
Well,
actually.
we know she's really into one thing, the Mrs. Melville murder books.
Which they sound awesome.
I
I'd
kind of
read
want to
them
read them as fast as Columbo winds up reading them.
an hour.
Do you think he really read those, though? I think he just
I think
made
he
it
did.
up.
No, I think he really plowed right through them. No, I do think he made them up.
Yeah, or, he like skimmed them a little bit, but
He's very vague because he's like, I like how she's good at her job. And that's it.
by that point, too, that's when they're not getting along. So
Yeah.
Ken's like, shut the fuck up, Columbo.
I think he does read them. I'll present evidence
so?
later.
Okay.
He just stays up all night for a week and just reads and
I
reads.
think he's at least read some of them,
Yeah.
but
Well,
I think all of them.
I would never question Columbo's dedication, so you're entirely possibly right.
I don't know if anybody knows this, but I don't sleep. I hang upside down in the garage. Mrs. Columbo feeds me flies.
I can eat up to a pound of mosquitoes a day. I think we did this exact same thing.
I don't care. It needs to be in there.
But in higher fidelity.
So our younger listeners right now, and I know we've got some Gen Zers in there somewhere. We've got to.
Yeah, there's babies listening
You
to
guys
this.
would be confused at this next part because Ken has to break, I think it's a 10 to make a phone call. and he's got to
I
go
think I
get,
was confused by this part.
honestly, I don't even know how to describe it. He breaks a bill because he needs it to go put like a dime in the payphone or something, however much it is then. And this turns out to be another part of his plot. He's actually calling Jim's wife, Joanna, from the general store. And it's, more lies. He tells her, hey, Joanna, me and Jim have made up, and I'm actually calling you instead of him to tell you that, like, we're good now. We signed an agreement. I'm not mad anymore. And Joanna actually says, wow, I thought you weren't speaking to us. And then, if I might editorialize here, she could have been like, you really blew your cork last time. Do you remember that, Ken? That was kind of awkward.
It would also be funny if he said that, if he just keeps saying, I'm sorry I blew my cork. And it also sort of proves the point that he's a shitty writer.
Yeah. I thought you were going to have a British insult for him.
Oh,
You were
yeah,
like, if I could editorialize.
I already forgot that. It's like when you cram for a test and then you forget it afterwards.
It all goes
That's
away.
what happened to me in those British insults.
All I can remember is the fake one I said, which was Kunkley Mahogany. Why do I remember that?
I don't know.
I saw a wrestler call
Memorable.
another wrestler a bell end like 2 days after we recorded.
And you felt prepared for it because you heard someone say that.
I don't think I would have registered what the person said.
You would have thought it was an actual bell.
Well, actually, after that episode where we discussed your Britishisms came out, I don't remember if it was Mike, who's, of course, one of our partners here at the Boo Tube Inc. network. He hosts the Oh Crap, Our Fecal Misfortunes and Foibles podcast. Go check it out. We'll have an ad for it later on. Or if it was Johnny Radical, of course, a friend of the podcast and superstar. One of them pointed out that bell end is like a dick. That's a thing that, like, it's dickish. It's bell ends.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, you're a bell end. Oh, you're a dick. You're a penis. You're a frothing genital.
Yeah, you're a peckerhead.
Yeah, that's right. Peckerhead.
You're a wiener man.
I believe that's what you said your favorite bone is, the pecker.
Yeah, it's a funny word, okay?
It's a stupid, hilarious word.
It is. It's been dumb forever, too.
Mhm.
It was never when you heard it, we're like, that's something people should say.
At
Never.
no age is pecker appropriate to say. It's always funny.
Only one living man still thinks the word pecker is cool, and it is Stephen King. Spencer, I think you can back me up on this.
I've definitely seen it. As soon as you said it, it clicked. It was like,
He
yep.
uses it a lot.
He'll use it, and it will be characters who you were supposed to sympathize with. So you're like, this guy is cool. Oh.
And then he said,
Well, he said pecker. Now I'm not sure.
So Joanna says, now that you have put your cork back on, does that work?
Yep.
Okay. So she says, now that you've calmed down, Ken, let's meet for dinner. And Ken's like, well, I'd love to, but I am going to my cabin. That's really important for you to know that, Joanna. I'm going to my cabin and I will be there a couple of days. Hey, by the way, do you have the number in case, I don't know if you wanted to call, nothing's going to happen, but if it did.
You've never needed to call me here before, ever.
Do I seem a little weird, Joanna? But anyway, call me if something comes up and I'm not mad at Jim at all.
For the first time, I've seen this episode probably a handful of times. And this is the first time I thought, you know what? If you're Joanna here, you might think that Ken's hitting on you. Because
maybe
they
a
would
little.
know these years and years of being
And
friends
Ken
how
would,
Ken is.
yeah.
Exactly.
But also in that regard, she would know if Ken was hitting on her. Like, okay, come on, it's just Ken being Ken.
True.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to acknowledge it if you're Joanna. Even if he was, you could just brush it off because it's like, I'm not going to
let the slime
encourage
slide
that.
off.
Those are later. With Ken and Jim freshly arrived at the cabin and Ken having planted the mostly final seeds of his pre-murder plot here. Ken is pushing Jim to call Joanna at the cabin because they've arrived, and Jim doesn't really seem to, he does say, hey, this place is pretty nice. I can see why the women go for it. And then other than that, Jim's not really seeming to feel it. He doesn't, Ken tries to get him to drink some more. He won't. He doesn't seem to really, his heart's not in it. Ken senses that. He's like, you're thinking about Joanna, aren't you? Why don't you give her a call? Go ahead and just pick up my phone right now and call her and tell her that you're working late. Just lie.
And Jim says, of course, oh, okay, I'll walk over here. And even though I know the number, I'm not going to dial it. What? What is this about?
I guess collect
Did
calls.
people do this?
I used collect calls. I don't remember. I think it was just if it was long distance and I wanted to save the money, maybe.
We're
But
calling an inmate?
maybe.
Wait, okay, so what order does he do it in? Because when he does the collect call thing, but I think Ken interrupts him and says, don't make a collect call,
yeah.
just put it on the thing.
Yeah, he says,
He
don't go
stops
through
it.
the operator. Now,
So it's just that, and then he dials it. Okay, there's not a middle one. Okay.
all Jim doesn't understand is the area code also, because Ken just tells him the area code and Jim's able to make the call. So,
So he didn't know his own area code.
yeah, that seems impossible.
It is a strange scene. Of course, the main reason here is Ken's like, no, you got to call directly because I want it to be on the records that you called, is what we know is actually happening. Lots of things that are important with this call, and it turns out to be a pivotal moment in the episode too. So, the middle of the call, we're about 15 minutes into the episode at this point. Here's our big murder moment.
Well, that's what I'm calling about it. I'm at the office, and I'm pretty well into this last chapter. I'd like to work straight through. Yeah, I know. I know. This will be the last time that I can...
Jimmy? Jimmy!
You exploded.
So Joanna's concerned. She immediately calls the police right after that, and then does what Ken said and calls him at the cabin.
Yeah, 911. How can I help you? Imagine if he was an operator.
I'm working my way up in my field.
Yeah, you got to kill yourself. Let me tell you what you got to do. You got to go home. You got to eat your cotton eggs, some onions, maybe a little bit of butter, something to grate the cheese into.
If someone invites you, this is a note on this murder, to a second location and then tells you to sit down on a couch that's covered in plastic, get the fuck out of there.
I've seen the episode a million times, and I saw the couch with plastic, and it still didn't register. It was preparation for shooting them. I was like, God, why do people put plastic on couches? Because I know that was a thing.
It's possible it wasn't for the murder thing.
It might
I
not have
thought
been.
that, but none of the other furniture
You're
was
right.
wrapped.
So Ken assures Joanna, it's fine. Calm down. Don't be like you are. I will head back right away, but I'm certain it's nothing to worry about. I bet that silly Jim, because it seems like a thing he would do, he's just playing a joke.
He's played his gun prank. I'm dead again.
He does it every couple months.
Also, Joanna, I'm not going to fly there. I'm going to drive there.
Oh, yeah.
casually.
Oh, this is a good one there. That's correct. He's not flying back. He's driving back. As the scene fades, he does take a moment to toast his dead former writing partner sprawled out on the couch with his brains blown out. So when our next scene begins, a still frantic Joanna is trying to explain the situation We've got a large gathering of police officers. Everyone's come to the office, to Jim's office, to see what's going on. They're trying to figure out if they can piece together what happened. They're rummaging around. They're taking pictures. They're asking questions. It's chaos. And Joanna is overwhelmed from all of this, so she has to leave the room to go get a refreshing, soothing drink at the water fountain. I think we all need that from time to time.
A moment of peace where no one's talking to you.
Specifically from a water fountain. Like, you have to go get a drink at the water fountain to calm down.
And, occasionally, it doesn't happen every time. You're at the water fountain, you're calming down, you're getting a drink, and a little trench coat gremlin comes up to you and starts being real sweet to you.
Grabs you by the shoulders.
Takes you home.
As Van just referenced, Joanna struggles to get the water fountain to work because it doesn't turn on. Columbo comes on, our first Columbo sighting. He approaches her and he tells her the trouble with these buildings is that water fountains never work.
It seems like one of the troubles with this ugly building.
And I know because I'm used to checking them because that's where I bathe.
I just sort of do a splash on my face and my nether regions. Mrs. Columbo says she's never going near those again.
You can smell me from feet away.
This is actually not the end of Columbo's whole sympathizing with her thing. He goes on to say, then you got to go to the coffee machine, then you lose your dime, and the coffee tastes lousy.
It's amazing how not at all relatable all
Any
of this is.
And yet it is. And yeah, you just kind of feel what he means.
You know what
soul.
he means. Yeah, it's the same as like going to get your whatever, and they don't have it. Well, strike that from the record. That's the most non-sentence anyone's ever spoken.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir. We don't have your whatever in stock.
Here at wherever.
You can tell what Columbo's doing here. He's trying to build rapport. He knows immediately how to...
I disagree.
Well,
I think
let's hear it.
He's moving in on her.
Oh, yeah.
Her husband's
He's
gone.
done with Mrs. Columbo.
Mrs. Melville made a lot of money, and this lady, she's got Miss Ferris or whatever her name is, she's going to have some cash soon.
So I think he's recognizing Joanna's weakened mental state, and he's trying to do her a favor, but also he's doing some police work here too.
Absolutely.
It's not just about Joanna. Actually, in fact, I would say it's more about the police work, but he's sensing that he can get to her through her fragile emotional state. He says,
one of my favorite things about Columbo is that he is
he's always working a lot of angles.
Yeah, so he doesn't come across as just like, heart of gold cop. He wants the best, but mainly he wants to solve this thing.
And he will use his folksy demeanor to get him to the end goal if he can.
Yeah, he'll make you breakfast.
Do you think he was waiting like in the room while all the other police interrogated her for her to make a move? Or do you think he stumbled across her and took advantage?
I feel like he was waiting.
I think he's the first, yeah.
I think he's got a sense, although he hasn't pieced the whole thing together yet, he's got a sense that he needs to start with her, so he was kind of picking his time. Because
Peering in from an air duct, maybe.
I was thinking he's more like a gargoyle, just statuesque, standing on the side of the building, waiting.
No one would notice. Oh, a gargoyle.
That cartoon called Gargoyles, and they were all monstrous gargoyles, and then there was Columbo.
Yeah, I'm the crime-solving one.
Apparently, this cartoon's very well regarded amongst the cartoon community.
I didn't know that. That's not something I was aware of.
Van and Brian, I heard they made fun of gargoyles when they were kids.
Yeah, they used to make fun of that and think it was stupid. It's probably real popular on streaming now. Of course, these millennials will make anything from their childhood popular instead of seeking out something new.
I know about streaming.
I'm on Peacock.
It's true. There's an important part that happens here in their meeting, where Joanna is asking about Ken. Why isn't Ken here? And Columbo at this time learns who Ken is. And he says, hey, is that the other half of the writing team? Joanna's response to, is that the other half of the writing team, is a very audible laugh. A pretty well done one. It's not like she's not chortling or anything, but it's
a scoff.
She can't keep it in.
It's a laugh of disbelief a little bit. Like, no.
She pauses for a bit after the laugh and then's like, yeah, the other half of the writing team. And they leave it there for now, but they'll come back to that later. It's a pretty well done moment. So now they're at Joanna's house. Columbo is all the way in her kitchen. He's got all her cabinets open. He's got all of her gear out, mixing bowls.
I think it feels a bit intimate.
A little bit.
To be this involved in someone's home.
He will stop at nothing, I guess.
And she's also saying, I'm not hungry.
That's my favorite
No,
part.
I'm going to do this anyway. It's for me. I hope you've realized that by now.
This is legitimately funny. Like, she twice is like, I'm really not hungry. She's trying
Columbo
to be nice.
says you will be. He insists he makes the best omelet. Even Mrs. Columbo says so. He makes the best omelet you've ever had.
I'll bet they're horrible.
And a great line, I'm sure you guys noticed, but I actually missed it the first couple times I saw this until I saw a reference online where he tells her the secret to a good omelet is no eggs.
Yes.
Yes.
just milk.
And he has eggs in there.
It has to be an accident. It can't be they can't have meant for him to say that.
He pours it on the plate because it won't flop onto the plate. It will pour.
This is one of the scenes where he has a couple like mumbles and noises he makes that it just have to be ad-libbed.
And Joanna's response to him saying no eggs, just milk, she seems to, like, the actual actress seems to be like, that's not what he meant to say, and just laughs and doesn't say anything else.
This scene is really, like, they both play it perfectly. It's also the first time in the episode where we're just like, oh, this show's just going to also be funny. Which is important to establish.
I fully expected at the end of the scene, he's got everything ready, and he goes, Joanna, what is an omelet?
I've never made one of these before. There's no Mrs. Columbo.
I'm very out of my element here.
The two are, this whole time, just like we're describing, just wandering around the kitchen and talking. It gets very casual between them. They talk more about the ongoing situation and have a little bit of a breakthrough from Columbo's end and how to approach this, where she wants to know what happened to her husband. She says, why is there no body? That doesn't even make any sense. Columbo says, yeah, that is weird. I'm trying to figure that out myself. And then there's a little pause, and he revisits what happened at the office, where he says, why'd you laugh? When I said the other half of the writing team, why was that your reaction? And this is important because, of course, that's the backbone of the whole plot here, is Ken isn't a writer. He just does the publicity, and that's it. He just handles all the behind-the-scenes stuff. Joanna acknowledges that stuff's important, but he's not actually doing any of the work. He's not a creator as such, so it's hard for me to say the other half of the writing team.
I don't know. She's kind of doing a little Yoko Ono routine here, if you ask me. She's saying, you're Jim, even though you're dead, you're the important one. Ken, he, no good, bad.
So in this analogy, Jim would be the John Lennon.
Correct.
And Ken would be Paul McCartney.
Yes. But that also...
You're like, what do you mean? What's the problem here?
Wait, it makes sense because it also explains why Ringo was there the whole time.
Oh, and Paul is still alive.
Paul is a dead man. Miss him. Sorry, I played Columbo backwards. My bad.
Oh, no.
This is where Columbo officially learns that Jim had been planning on breaking up the team and that Ken didn't take the news well. Honestly, he's pretty much got a motive right now, and Columbo loves motive, so he pretty much already suspects Ken. He hasn't even met him yet, and he at this point already knows, I think this guy did it.
The joy of Columbo is largely watching him pick someone apart for an hour.
After he gets that first sense, and it differs each episode. Sometimes he really doesn't know right away and kind of gets there. And this one, I think it's instant.
Immediate.
He hasn't even met him. And especially once he meets him, he definitely knows in this one. So Ken has finally arrived from his cabin, and he stops into Joanna's in the middle of this. It's not exactly at this moment, but near, because Columbo still has not left the house, although that could be days for all we know.
He stays there for a bit. He says, you don't mind if I crash in your basement?
Really great direction
Lieutenant Columbo,
here.
why are you in your pajamas?
You have one of those little hats on, even. The direction here is really good. As the door opens, Columbo is blocked, so Ken doesn't know he's there at first. And then when the door closes, Columbo's just standing there smiling.
Their meeting is pretty typical stuff for Columbo, because Columbo is trying to be polite at this point, even though he's already kind of thinking like this is probably the murder. So Ken is going to take on the role of acting kind of tough with Columbo. Like, this is my close friend. I care very much about him. You need to get out there and solve this case. That's the tone that he takes with Columbo initially.
That always it makes me kind of laugh. I watched more Bones, by the way, guys. And anyway, one of the episodes, Bones and Booth are meeting with the victim's mother. And the mother's like, why aren't you out there solving the case? Why are you asking me all these terrible questions? Because cops or whatever, investigators have to ask all these questions. And it drives me nuts, especially in today's society, not as much as 70s, when we've all seen all these cop shows. We all know cops have to ask every question. Why are you still mad whenever a cop comes and says, I'm a suspect? That drives me nuts.
Right. Like, I don't want to talk to cops either, but the thing is, if they come to me in a situation where they're looking for a lost relative or spouse,
I know what they're doing.
I'm telling them anything they want to know, and I'm not going to be mad because I understand that that's helping. It is weird that less weird in a show this old, but it's weird that persists.
I don't understand why in today's society that's still a trope. I think it should be gone.
And why in a terrific show like Bones would something like that be presented?
Yeah, the thought process there is odd because it's like you think if someone's questioning me, then no one else could be doing anything out there trying to find answers. It's a one-person force, and this person's busy with me, so they can't do their more important job.
One of these shows should fix that by having the person be like, oh, there's actually more than one police officer. And then the relative of the missing person can just go, oh, I was confused.
My mistake.
Let's
continue.
This fixes it for all media going forward.
Do you guys think that is something that was largely created by fiction, or do you think it probably has happened a lot where people have said, you get out there and stop bothering me and go solve that?
It's definitely a real thing.
I think so.
Because that's how people are. Like, they completely miss the point when they're upset about a thing and don't know how to handle it, so they only observe the most obvious thing that they can think of in their brain at that moment. And it makes no sense, but they have to be mad. And they have to blame someone, so that's how it comes out.
We've all worked service jobs. We've seen this happen in the smaller stakes situations.
Yeah, never this kind of stakes.
Sir, your bowling ball chipped. Why are you as mad at me as you are?
That exact sort of thing has happened to all of us.
And by the way, do you know what you do with bowling balls? You fling them at stuff. They chip, they scratch.
They're going to do it.
Happens.
Sometimes, when you're in middle school, you throw them off of your roof.
Sure.
It's something we did.
We've all been there, and we threw pizza off the roof, too.
Yeah. Would never do that now. I would throw it into my mouth.
Like we mentioned, Columbo kind of already knows that Ken is probably our murderer here. He casually grills him immediately. Not in a really obvious way, but Ken just already knows that the body has not been found. So Columbo says right away, well, how'd you know that we haven't found the body? You know, he won't let anything Ken says go unanswered.
And Ken, of course, oh, good sir.
The way he answers every question you ask Ken.
You should know by now that everything is on the news. How could one question me, Kenneth?
I wish he lit a cigarette and rolled his eyes every time he did that, to the point where you're like, I thought he had a cigarette.
And suddenly he has two.
He's got like 8 of them.
In this scene, even Ken saying he came back from his cabin in San Diego, Columbo couldn't leave that alone. He was like, oh, you got family there? What were you doing in San Diego visiting? What were you doing?
Oh, you've been checking out that place where they got that orca? I heard it ate some people once.
You know, killer whale's something of a misnomer.
They're actually dolphins, more closely related. Did you know that? I have a lot of dolphin
Of course
facts.
I knew it. I know everything. Mrs. Melville knows all about the creatures of the sea.
Well, actually, I spent some time aboard this submarine. It was called the Sequest or something like that. Anyway, I learned about these talking dolphins.
Mrs. Melville was a submarine.
And a dolphin at the same time.
We are very much so approaching the time of the episode where Ken won't go more than about 5 minutes without saying Mrs. Melville would have done better at this. And it's anything you can think of. Ken is also really quick to redirect Columbo here when Columbo does try to ask him, what were you doing in San Diego? Oh, how is your cabin? He's just trying to make small talk to cover his nosiness. And Ken says, let's get back to the case, Columbo. I'm very interested in solving this, just as you are, of course.
Even though Columbo has already begun using his own bluster against him.
Absolutely true. Joanna leaves to make them drinks, like the 70s kind of was known for. Ken tells Columbo, Mrs. Melville would be way ahead of you by now. She would have already solved this case. This was no ordinary killing, Columbo. This was the work of a professional.
It was so goofy the first time when he's like, well, Mrs. Melville would have. I'm like, I get that this guy would do that, but the first instance of it is like jarring to see.
This is like when I first found out about the internet for real, like when people were like, here's what it looks like when there are YouTube personalities. And I was like, that's a person? Yeah, he's acting in a way no one would, but it also is a level of pomposity that someone with that level of success would have.
Absolutely.
And again, I have to credit Jack Cassidy. He is playing this too far over the top, but it does work. It's one of those. It's kind of like James Cromwell
That's what I was
and
gonna say.
Renegade, only this is a good show when he's pulling that off.
True. Oh, what's that, Mrs. Melville? Oh, it's time for a break? Okay, break time.
Oh, crap!
Greetings, fellow poopers. I'm Brittany.
And I'm Mike, and you are cordially invited to check out Oh Crap, Our Fecal Misfortunes and Foibles.
It's a podcast about poop stories, from hilarious, disgusting, embarrassing, to even heartfelt.
After all, everybody poops.
I know I do.
Damn right. So join us for some shits and giggles. Literally, find us on Spotify.
Ken is so determined to show Columbo his theory that he wants the police to follow that He's immediately taken him back to Jim's office, and it's a quick cut. We don't even get a transition. They're just both at Jim's office all of a sudden. And Ken has brought Columbo. He is now pulling that same list that he carefully put in Jim's drawer out himself. The cops didn't find it, but he pulls it out and gives it to Columbo and says, aha, these are the names of some of the top men. I'm writing this word for word how he says. These are some of the top men in organized crime on the West Coast. And then announces to Columbo, obviously, one of them had Jim killed.
Some of them are even from Frisco. I don't know why I remember, but he mentioned several cities, and I remember him saying Frisco and then registering that no one calls San Francisco that anymore.
Did they ever?
Yeah, they did at one point, but that's just never said.
Before the Spanish flu?
I think it was before the Earthquake World Series.
Oh, okay.
Columbo immediately is unconvinced with this angle that Jim is trying to go at him with, but we're not going to hear the end of this just yet. He does play dumb. It's one of the many times he plays dumb just for the sake of hearing Ken out and making him think, okay, fine, I'm not on to you.
Even though Columbo could have reasonably said, this doesn't fucking mean anything.
Just ripped up the list.
No, sir. I believe that you should look at it. I think some of the names might be underlined and circled and say things like mob man next to them.
And then I signed the paper.
but he gave it. I didn't do it.
And Ken, of course, is also excited to note that Jim's prints will be on that paper when he tells Columbo. And
he had that ready. I really like how Cassidy trips over Peter Falk to say that, as if it's a prepared line.
It's not the only person who does this in Columbo, too, but the idea that he's a smart guy who's planned this all out, thinks that it's better to tell that stuff to the police rather than let them find it is such a strange concept.
But I'm going to tell you right now, if you're in Jack Cassidy's shoes, if you've ever murdered someone and a detective shows up at your door, if the detective is David Boreanaz or something, it's like a big stud guy, you're fine. He's not fixing it. If the detective walks up, acts dumb, and looks like a gremlin, he is solving this case, you were fucked.
Yeah, you're already caught.
What else would a guy like that have to do? You know he's a freak who's into one thing really hard if he walks in hunched over in a trench coat like that.
Good point.
This guy would be good.
And the character of Ken, you hinted like he's smart enough, but he's not smart enough because he's smart enough to come up with this plan, as we eventually find out, but he's not smart enough to realize all the stupid things he's doing that is clearly giving him away. And I do think that's a type of person.
Sure.
And that type of person always thinks they're smarter than they are.
Because there's a big level of hubris here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he has the success, so he must be great.
And if he were slightly smarter, he would be the type of person to be like, oh, I'm an idiot. Yeah, because he knows.
I'm just fortunate to have made millions of dollars off my friend doing something good.
Yeah, I guess the main thing with Ken is that he certainly has nothing in the way of subtlety at all. That's just not something he can do. He's
not even in his wardrobe.
No.
Which gets more and more extravagant as the episode goes on. He's got little hats and gloves.
Well, he's got to impress the interviewees and anyone who's around him. He's got to make sure he makes the best impression.
That's true.
All those ladies he's going to take to the cabin later. Ken, I think the biggest thing he is more than smart or anything is just that he is very practiced with manipulation.
Yeah.
He definitely has that part down. So maybe he's not necessarily, he doesn't necessarily pick up on the psychology behind what he should be talking to Columbo, but he certainly is very pleased when he has any chance to deceive.
The big disadvantage Ken has also is he's taking Columbo totally at face value. Columbo is not taking him at face value.
I can't decide if I feel like that would be something that would fool anyone or not, but we have the benefit of having seen the episodes. We know what Columbo does. I just don't feel like I would believe anyone was going to be that self-effacing, like, and agree with anything you said, especially a cop who that's his job. I don't think he'd go along with stuff that readily. I don't see how that would fool anyone.
I think if you do go look, and like Brian and I have mentioned in the past, we watch a lot of true crime stuff or ingest a lot of true crime things, and you see the like interrogation footage of cops talking to people, whether they're guilty or not. And of course, the one thing they do is give them the leading questions like, oh, you were there when you killed that person, right? Whatever. But in this scenario, what I'm trying to get at is that those cops do kind of do that. They will play so nice and just be like, hey, man, I'm on your side. I get it. I understand why you killed all those people. I would have done the same in your shoes. But here's the thing. And it's just, I do kind of foresee that could happen and occur and works against a certain subset of society.
I think, yeah, and it's been effective at, in some false convictions.
Well, yeah.
Also, I do like the idea, at least, even if it's not 100% realistic, maybe, that someone like Ken would be swayed by that, by someone playing the role of his subservient, so to speak, intellectually.
But Columbo says, okay, sure. But, I mean, this is possible, but where's the body? Why would a professional killer go to any length to hide the body? They're not going to be worried about that. But you give me something to think about. I appreciate the thought. And then Columbo has one other observation because he always does this. He agrees and then says, hold on, what about this? In this case, he says, hey, this list that you gave of names is folded lengthwise, like someone's carrying it. Why would he do that if he's just going to put it in his drawer? Ken is actually pretty quick on his feet here. He says, well, Columbo, first of all, you're starting to remind me of Mrs. Melville. Second of all, that unfortunately your observation, it's useful, but he did that all the time. He used it as bookmark, so he probably put it in something and then put it in the drawer.
I just fold paper. So it doesn't matter if it wouldn't work in whatever I was supposed to put it in. If this was used against me, it would be incorrect because I fidget. So I fold shit.
He asked so many questions that would fall into that in this particular episode too. Like, why would a person do that? And you'd be like, well, I just do that.
And in this case, I think it more is to rile up.
Yes. And
Ken.
to kind of like get a bulk of data from this guy and see if he slips up. And then later he does ask a couple of questions that are along these lines where you're like, oh no, that is extra weird.
The last thing that happens in this scene, and I don't know exactly what Ken's motivation is here. Maybe he genuinely is finding some endearing qualities in Columbo, but he decides to, on his way out, hand him down an entire set of the Mrs. Melville books, like 15 of them. He just shoves them in his arms and pushes them out the door.
Well, it's from the office. It wasn't his collection.
Yeah.
So take these free books. It was dead gems.
I don't know, too, if it's maybe some kind of attempt to, like, an odd kind of bribery, like, oh, here, I'm nice. I'll give you these books.
Or even more of his arrogance to be like, here's my work. Carry it home with you.
Not even his. Like, he didn't do any of it.
But he's playing it off as it.
Yeah, oh, yeah, he sure is. He never really admits outside of this context that he didn't have anything to do with the writing. He only,
other than at the very end, he does have that one line that we'll get to.
He gets vulnerable and like, because he knows Joanna knows and obviously Columbo knows, but he definitely wants to identify as a writer.
Yes.
Even though he's not.
You know, all these kids these days, I identify as a writer.
I don't want to be called a con man, which I guess is really all Ken is.
On the way out, as Columbo leaves with his 15 books and just loaded up in his arms, we get his first one more thing moment in this episode, which really annoys Ken. Oftentimes these things do annoy the murderers, but because you think you got rid of him, it's like, finally he's gone. And he steps back in and says, just one more thing. In this case, like we were talking about earlier, he wants to know if Ken got the news and then drove right back from the cabin. Ken has a little reason and response. And my favorite part about this clip is Columbo's response. I picked this entire clip because of how Columbo answers him after Ken goes into his excuse.
You know me, I'd have taken a plane. I mean, it's a big airport and they run every half hour. It'd have been a lot faster.
Well, that's true, but in a situation like that, who thinks clearly? And look at it this way. You add up all the time it takes to drive to and from an airport, how much time do you really save?
That's all he says, and then he leaves on that note. So Columbo is clearly not impressed with that reasoning in that case. And it is kind of fair. That's not a very good point. It's like, well, did you ever consider that you have to drive to the airport first before you get on a plane and go there much faster? You forgot that, didn't you?
And we also do have to remember that this is 1970, whatever.
You just jump right on that plane back then.
It would cost $3. You get cigarettes on the plane.
Yeah, bring your weapons on.
They don't get, there's like 4 recliners. You can have all 4 of them.
No one would have dreamed you'd be asked to take off your belt and shoes. I love when old people say things like, people used to dress nice to fly. Now they just wear comfy like sweats. And yes, because it's awful if you wear anything real to an airport.
Yeah.
You have to get nude in front of everyone.
So returning home, Ken goes right back to his plot because he's got, I guess, the final piece of the whole thing here where we don't see quite what it is. We just know that he is briefly in his car's trunk when he pulls up to his house. And then he kind of goes inside. Key point here is he's grabbing his unread mail and kind of unconsciously going through it while he's doing this whole process, and he heads inside. And then he places what is clearly a pre-planned call to Columbo and says, hey, I need you to get over here right now. It's an emergency. The police arrive, and we finally see what Ken's plan with Jim's body has been, because we were not privy to this, and we weren't 100% sure what Ken was doing when he pulled into his house, although you could kind of see it coming. this is where he's decided to put Jim's body. He's
This
had
is
it the
so
whole time,
stupid.
and he just dumps it on the lawn.
I sure hope they don't look in my trunk.
Just anywhere other than this would have been smarter.
Why not just throw the body in the river?
Yeah. Like, they think he was killed at the office. You were in another city. Why would you bring the body in your trunk back to town?
These mobsters, man, dedicated.
Ken says it was waiting for him when he arrived. It was just on the lawn. He tells Columbo, every time I start to feel sorry for myself, I just remember about poor Joanna and how she's lost a husband, and then I can't get too sad.
He feigns disgust several times.
Vultures.
Yeah, it's really funny because the whole time his eyes are dead.
So inside, the phone rings. The press wants an interview with Ken, and this is another thing Ken's disgusted. He's disgusted at the lookers-on outside. He's disgusted with the press. He says no comment because, of course, this is his dear friend, and he's heartbroken that he's dead. Columbo marvels all the while at what a nice house Ken has.
And he gets in there by saying, "Can I follow you? My jacket doesn't have any lining." Which is a great Columbo moment.
But Ken just goes right for that, too. He's like, sure, come on in, Columbo.
Looking at you, yes, I believe that.
He then casually mentions, not only is this place nice, but you also have that cabin in San Diego, too. So he's observing, my God, you've got a lot of money. You've really benefited from this.
I thought these paintings were only seen in museums. He's honestly insulting Ken without Ken realizing it.
Actually, this is one of a few scenes in here where, so there's always a cat and mouse game in Columbo. These two have 3 or 4 scenes where they kind of trade shots at each other. And Columbo's are more veiled than Ken's are. Ken's are well, you're ugly. And Columbo's got this kind of thing. Well, gee, I wish that I could be a horrible, smug murderer like you. And it's just always they're at each other.
And Ken never internalizes one of them.
No.
But Columbo gets every single one Ken throws at him.
It's great.
So he casually asks at this time what happens in the writing partnership when a partner dies. This is, again, not Columbo's most subtle moments here. And Ken says, well, it all goes to the deceased's estate. It's not going to be split down the middle. I don't get any of it. And Columbo says, well, I guess that's tough luck for you unless you insured each other. He's just kind of probing a little bit. He's trying to see if Ken is going to tell any of the details of how the finances are going to shake out now that they have found Jim's body. And Ken says, hey, this was clearly a warning. They put that body on the lawn because if I were going to be taking up Jim's job of writing this book and exposing organized crime, this is for me to not do that.
Now I don't ever have to write again. And suddenly everything's looking great for me.
What a shame I can't continue to use my prodigious gift.
And then he goes ahead and points at Columbo and says, and this proves my professional killer theory. So I think we got this case wrapped up, Columbo.
Just go
we're
lock
done.
up those names on that list.
It's all like Joey Mobman.
John Gotti.
So I think we can agree so far that the stupidest part of this worked for Ken, because the alibi thing, it's fine how he went about that. But the whole idea of really going all in on the professional killer angle to the point where he brings the body back.
Yeah, that's the failure.
It's a little absurd.
Not so great on that one.
And bringing the body back at all and putting it on your own lawn.
We get the next one more thing here is Columbo's about to be on the way out, where he asks Ken, can you tell me one more time your events tonight? What you went through? And the problem is that Columbo's spotted that pile of mail that we mentioned earlier, and he doesn't really understand at what point in all of this, where you drove home and saw your friend's body on your yard, did you decide to open your mail?
Well, Lieutenant Columbo, when you get something from the Columbia Record House, you open it.
This one is Astro Lounge by Smash Mouth.
And Ken says, well, I just needed something to distract me.
I might as well be walking on the sun.
And Columbo says bills can be very distracting. He leaves it there, but he doesn't buy that. And it is a good point.
He does say it with such conviction. He says, bills, they can be pretty distracting. I think he's been distracted by a bill before.
He is believable there.
Mm-hmm.
He lets it drop, but it's another one of those things, he's not really buying that. He just pretends to be.
And this one is weirder because I get grabbing your mail reflexively, but then physically opening it as you're calling in the murder.
If you did that, you wouldn't be processing what you were looking at. There's no way. Like if you had truly seen your friend's body. It would just be
the motions.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is one of those things that Columbo's picked up here that it's something Ken really wouldn't have done if he didn't know what was going on here more than he says. One of my favorite scenes is coming up. It's a new day. It's the next scene. It's a bright, sunshiny California day. It looks like it's like a Tuesday. It's clearly not a weekend because there's not that many people out, but there's a few strollers. And Columbo is walking with a businessman. We've never met him before. He's just some guy who's clearly in insurance or accounting or something. But they head to a little like a food stand, and it's called Tail of the Pup.
Yeah.
And they both get a hot dog.
What's the stand look like?
Shit.
It's a hot dog.
Yeah, it looks like hot dog. It looks like it's going to fall apart.
But that hot dog is probably good. That was my thought.
Yeah, the hot dog did look good.
Yeah.
I had a hot dog the same night. I needed something hot.
Was it a coincidence or did that make you want one?
No, I was at Walmart doing extra job and I was like, I need something hot to eat real quick. Boom, hot dog right there. Then I got home and watched Columbo eat a hot dog at a restaurant shaped like a hot dog. And I think he probably says to this guy, the best foods you get from places that look like that food.
It doesn't matter what the food is. Sometimes it's actually kind of hard to tell because you can't make out the silhouette of every kind of food. You can't be as fortunate every time as with hot dog where the food just looks like a big cylinder kind of that's curved a little bit at the end.
This is an unusual food scene in Columbo because I don't believe it happens in the first couple that were before this one, but we haven't perhaps yet established fully Columbo's real cuisine love. Brian, do you remember it? It's chili.
Chili, that's it.
That's right.
He normally only eats chili if he's going to stop for lunch.
Helps
so this
him
is
smell
kind of,
even better.
I bet that just sticks to his
God.
jacket.
And then he
clings to the fabric.
Chili farts all day long. That's spicy. Oh, this one was a veggie one. You can tell.
It's really hard to find a place that looks like a bowl of chili. I'm just saying.
Same with cottage cheese. The best cottage cheese restaurant is Cheesy Joe's, but the thing's shaped like a big blob.
I'm getting the taco. I got to go no place but tacos, 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 tacos. It's the best.
And the toughest thing about tacos is how the roof tapers upward toward the center. You can't eat. You have to crawl into the place, and you can't stand upright too because it's shaped like a taco.
Well, yeah, and you climb through the meat.
Yeah, there's actually just piles of meat in there, too.
Help yourself. Actually, this isn't a restaurant. It's where I live.
Yeah, you eat your way in.
I'm a mouse.
Just one more thing. Where's your block of cheese?
He did get a block of cheese
You
earlier
guys own
in
a
the episode. I really like this Al fella. He takes care of my nemesis.
So not just for the reasons we just got into, which is a whole other thing. I love that too, but I just love this stupid scene. It's not entirely necessary either. But what is happening here at the Tail of the Pup is that Columbo is actually meeting with an insurance guy, and he just wants details about Ken's arrangement with Jim and what's going to happen upon Jim's death.
But the insurance guy is fucking thrilled. He's like, I got me a new insurance policy.
Yeah, it was so funny. He starts
really
to do
excited.
that immediately.
Mm-hmm.
He clearly thinks Columbo has needed to talk to him. He's like, oh man, you need a policy. I've been waiting for this moment. And then it turns out to just be professional. So Mr. Tucker is reluctant. The scene ends with Columbo kind of ominously saying, well, I don't want to cause you any trouble. I can get a court order if that's necessary. And it fades there.
It's so Columbo, though, that line there, because
Is it a threat?
It is, but it's also a friendly way of doing it.
Yeah.
It's like, just help me out, man, or I'll have to do this. But so much putting the onus on the other guy. He's saying, like, I don't want to do that.
So do you think Mr. Tucker went ahead and just gave him the information?
I absolutely do. That's how I read the scene.
Yeah.
It ends with him saying that, kind of shrugging. They're both holding their dogs that Columbo paid for. I think he told him.
I just think that is it's not really consistent with the rest of the episode, and it's one of those like slice of life moments for the character. It's just wonderful.
I think these are what make good TV, because like when I think modern criticism sometimes goes far afield in being like, this is extraneous, and what they mean is to the plot or something. But these sorts of moments flesh out what your show even is. They give it color and flavor versus being like, we're hitting this beat.
Having that extra little opportunity to learn a few more things about Columbo too. It's so brief where we actually get quite a bit of additional information on him. There's a lot of value in that for a show that's really built around that character. And now we know that much more about him here.
And this insurance guy is just a big egg.
I like Mr. Tucker. I would let him write me an insurance policy.
Would you?
He's long gone now. So meanwhile, Ken is getting back to his life. His grief has passed, and he is going to go back on dates and do the things that Ken does, which is that pretty much.
Which is fuck.
Currently, he has taken a much younger date, much younger date out to a play.
1/3 of his age, perhaps.
She's maybe like, 22 or something?
Right, 1/3 of his age.
And he's 120. So he's busy telling her how smart he is as they exit. And that's actually what is happening. Of course, it's basically, she didn't know what was going on in the plot, and Ken was like, I figured that out immediately. I knew all about it.
It's almost even worse because she just says, I liked that. It had a real twist ending, and he scoffs right then. It's just like shitting over, someone enjoyed it, and the whole point he took is, I could have done better.
He's the kind of guy that would go to a horror movie and just be like, that wasn't even scary. It was just this. Wasn't even scared because I knew that this was going to fucking give in to the thing and enjoy it.
I get annoyed when people take that as a point of pride when watching something. It's like, I don't think you're enjoying art correctly if you're sitting here trying to figure things out the whole time. Like, sink into that shit.
He also has a real condescending moment where she says, like, oh, I guess I just didn't pick up on all that. He's like, well, you're young. You'll
not eventually get to my status where you might even write 16 Mrs. Melville novels.
Coincidentally, or perhaps not coincidentally, Lily from the general store.
Lily Lysenko?
Lily Lysenko, the very one. She just so happens to be at this play too. And she spots Ken from like way across the room.
Screams at him.
Shouts at him all the way across the room through a bunch of strangers and forces Ken to leave his date and reluctantly approach her. You can tell he does not want to at all, but he has to. So he attempts to be cordial and brush her off as quick as possible. But Lily has an agenda, and it comes out because she realizes Ken is not going to give her the time of day if she doesn't. So crux of this situation is Lily's blackmailing Ken. She saw more than he meant for her to see when he brought Jem to the general store that day of the murder, and she's going to go ahead and make her move now. It's not clear exactly what she wants at this point, but she's telling him, hey, I think I might have some information you want to know about, and we need to meet. You need to tell your date goodbye. So Ken has no choice. He has to go back, tell his young date I'm leaving, and it's time for me to go hang out with Miss Lysenko.
I think what he specifically says, I'm going to go have strawberry dinner with Lily Lysenko.
Oh man, you took the words right out of my mouth, because in the very next scene, a resigned Ken is seated across from an excited Lily at a fancy restaurant with red walls and a big bowl of strawberries on ice between them.
This is a really good scene, too. Like, Jack Cassidy with his clenched teeth through half of it. He, says compliments while clearly angry.
Like, murderously angry. And Lily actually even knows that. She's like, you're kind of making me nervous while she's just shoveling strawberries in her face.
It's one of the best parts about Lily. She consistently is like, I think you might kill me, while she continues forward, because she doesn't have a lot of a choice.
So Lily asks what Ken thought of the play, and this gives Ken another chance to be like, oh, I knew all of it. It's obvious. It isn't. I don't know. I'm just that smart.
I think that a lot of men, dating back to the beginning of time to present, should just wear shirts that say, I know everything and hate everything.
Because those men never don't do that.
Right. You're not going to be able to have a conversation because they'll correct you and say, this is better, or I know better about this.
Lily takes this time to tell him her true life story, as she calls it, where she happens to have seen something she shouldn't have at the general store. Ken gets the idea of what she's getting into, and she does say, essentially, I'm fond of you and I don't want to get you in trouble. So she didn't go to the police because she does actually like Ken and doesn't want him to go to jail for what he's apparently done. And Ken kind of tries to get to the end of this and says, okay, Lily, how much?
What is your very reasonable request?
Lily has an exact number in mind. She is obviously playing this out, done the math. It's $15,000. Which I didn't do it. Did you?
Did you do it?
It's worth a little over $116,000 today.
That's a good chunk of money. She's a six-figure settlement.
But if you're coming up to fucking J.K. Rowling or whatever, just ask for $1 million worth or $500,000
Now,
worth.
I thought this too. But then we have to think about wealthy people as compared to someone making a living wage. Different situation then. There weren't billionaires.
That's true.
This would be a very wealthy person, but then when you think of asking for a moderately wealthy person for $100,000, it's almost right. But still, saying $15,000 also sounds really.
It's funny.
It just sounds funny. It's like in Killer Joe when they ask for 10.
Yeah.
Although it's supposed to be funny in that.
I would have rounded up. I don't like 15,000. It's a weird number.
Would you go to 20?
20.
Or would you go to 25? Because I don't like 20.
I like 25 a lot.
I want 25.
That's a lot more money then, though.
Yeah, you don't like the 5.
I don't like zeros and fives.
The fives don't bother me one bit.
Fives
I'm
are
okay
good
with
round
the
numbers. I know it's not really round.
Yeah.
But they're
kind of
a quarter. It's a quarter.
It's a sexy number.
I like it.
I'd be asking for 18.
Then he would really think you're
18.4.
Yeah. Maybe 18,450.
Yeah, so Ken does agree immediately and seems, if you didn't know better, I think he looks happy that he's getting blackmailed in the moment.
And I think
he might think of it differently later when he thinks about it. He's like, wait, blackmail's bad.
How soon do you think he realized during this conversation
what he was going to have to do? I think immediately.
I don't know. I think he got through this, got an hour of being like, hell yeah, I negotiated the shit out of that. And then went, oh no, I have to kill that person. Wait a minute.
What would Mrs. Melville do?
Do you think he wanted a strawberry at any point in that conversation?
He didn't eat one.
He didn't.
I don't think so.
I don't know what the point of freezing them is either. Seems like that'd be harder to bite through them. I just want my strawberries to just...
How do you de-thaw a strawberry? You can't microwave it. That'd be disgusting.
Well, I don't think you freeze them because I think they turn to mush if you freeze them.
I mean, I'm sure they're not totally frozen, but they serve it on that big old bowl of ice. It's a strange thing. I would have thought it would at least have chocolate or something. But no, it's just
if I walk into a fancy restaurant and
I'll take your iced strawberries, please.
If they have a bowl of ice with strawberries on the table, I'd be like, I'm leaving. This is a fake fancy restaurant. I could do this.
I'll take whatever fruit you have lying about in your ice.
The other thing we have to remember with Lily asking for $15,000 is you probably want it to be like a lot of money, but not so much that it'll kill you instead, I guess, maybe, is another thing.
That's true. That's
you have to really toe the line there.
But what you have to do is be like, listen, Jack Cassidy, here's what's going to happen. I have written down everything and given it to my courier service. And if I don't give them a message at next Wednesday at noon, then they will send that letter and you will be revealed. So therefore, you can't kill me.
I like the idea, too, of Barbara Colby breaking character here and just referring to him as Jack Cassidy.
Yeah, of course.
And she refuses not to for that scene. So again, the unexpected plot departure, we didn't see this coming. This is settled now, so we can return to Columbo, which is where we wanted to be.
Do you guys smile every time he comes back?
Yes.
Every time. Every single time.
Columbo is doing some returning of his own, as I wrote down in my notes, and I no longer think that makes sense, but I'm going to say it anyway. So he has that huge set of books that Ken loaded him up with, and he is showing up at Ken's front door uninvited, which he does, to return them all. The maid, I think, answers the door and tells him, sorry, Ken is busy, you'll have to wait. And Columbo enters. We see that Ken is in the midst of some kind of weird photo shoot, exclusive interview thing.
Looking smug as hell.
And he is not happy to see Columbo, as much as ever. So the interview has reached its final question, and our interviewer, Gloria, says, well, what of the future for Mrs. Melville? What's she going to do next? And Ken says, oh, well, with Jim gone, I don't think I want to... I can't even say it because I can see Jack Cassidy's face. I don't think I want to do this series anymore without Jim. It's not going to be the same without him. So I think that's going to be Mrs. Melville's last case. And then he says, you know what? I don't think I have the heart to write anymore ever again.
I'm no good with writing anymore. I'm too hurt.
This is why I'm not. I'm never going to play an NFL game again.
As they say goodbye, we get the sense as viewers that Ken took this interview for a very specific reason, which is that he has the hots for Gloria, the interviewer.
He pats her on the ass, basically.
He says, how about I give you another kind of interview, more in depth next week?
That's my penis. I'm sorry. Let me back up. That's my pecker.
Yeah, I bet he calls it Greyhawk or something.
With that being done, he then turns rudely to Columbo, who's been watching this whole thing very astutely. Columbo says the books are great. Ken says, go away.
Oh, I almost forgot my favorite part of the thing when he's walking the entertainer person away is he walks past Columbo and he says something like, maybe the next time we're not disturbed.
It's all so petty because he's just tired of Columbo, and Columbo's playing the oblivious, excited puppy sort of thing.
Columbo, when he is carrying these books into, he is visibly tired and beleaguered and just under his breath goes, 2 trips. Which is another one of my very favorite little Peter Falk moments. Because I don't know if that was scripted, but he just mumbles half his sentence and then says 2 trips.
Columbo is, like I said, he's playing innocent right now. So even though Ken's being really mean to him, he says, oh, I'm so sorry. And he plays dumb. And then while playing dumb, does that thing where he's also being nosy while he's being dumb and says like, oh, I noticed you got those 2 bottles of champagne. Are you going to be going out to the cabin by yourself? And Ken says, no, like I can drink 2 bottles of champagne, Columbo.
And this checks. Who couldn't? Champagne is like water or something.
I mean, look at Jack Cassidy. The guy's like bright red. He's beet red. He's drinking those 2 bottles.
No one with sideburns like that in the 70s was sober.
Ken exits the house with Columbo still in it. He's so eager to go.
I love that too. He just doesn't even think like there's the man who could catch me is in my house. He's like, I got to get the fuck away from this guy.
Columbo just chases after him outside to confirm that list of crime boss names, just like you said, Ken, there's nothing there. So I really hit a dead end there.
I sure wish Mrs. Melville could help me here.
Yeah, and even when you get in your car, I'm going to kind of lean in there like I might forget you're not Mrs. Columbo. He leans into Ken's window almost like he's about to give him a goodbye kiss.
Here's another just one more thing is Columbo he's been out there with him as he leaves. He's raced to the car door. He's telling him goodbye. And he says, I did check the phone company records, by the way, from your cabin in San Diego. And there was a call. It was from the cabin to the Ferris house. I bet you have an answer for that. Ken says, yes. I made that call myself to assure Joanna that everything was fine between me and Jim. So I did that, and it was just to tell Joanna we were good. Columbo says, all right, have a good trip at the cabin by yourself. And Ken, you know what Ken is actually doing. He's actually returning to the cabin for a very specific reason, which is Lily. He brings her a briefcase we can assume is full of money and the 2 bottles of champagne. Lily stupidly quickly agrees to have a very private dinner with the man she's blackmailed for murdering someone. The scene transitions. The two have clearly eaten an entire meal that she cooked, I guess.
Strawberries.
He makes her cook the meal.
Isn't that amazing?
What a nice touch to what a jackass this guy is.
The best part of all of this is apparently the house is like attached to the general store.
It's like right in the back of it.
I thought that looked really cool. It's like a shopkeep thing, when they live above it or something. She just sort of lives behind it. And her place looked interesting.
Well, it looked like the 70s.
Yeah. Right. Interesting.
Lily admits that the champagne is kind of hitting home for her, and she's a little concerned she can't trust Ken. She does tell him that openly.
Because, you killed that guy.
I really like that they have her say this just because, hold your horses here. I do know you've murdered someone. Because even though she acts, impulsively, it lets us know, she doesn't know. I feel like in modern, not just modern, in all of the TV shows we watch, a lot of times victims of crimes are just kind of like, sure. And you don't even get the sense that they sense danger.
And Ken is kind of acting a little hurt, like, well, why would you think I would murder you, Lily? I'm clearly just here to hang out with you because I've always been so interested in you.
This broad witnesses one murder and assumes I'm always killing faithful, as if one murder is not immediately disqualifying as a human.
When Ken seems to have won her over again from her initial misgivings, he's like, hey, now that we're both just really drunk, how about you and me go for a late night boat ride in the middle of the lake at midnight?
He even says the middle of the lake. That's the best part.
And she, to her credit, is like, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I'm not going to be alone with you in a boat on the middle of the lake.
She's busy admiring your money as she turns him down and says, nah, I better not take that boat ride. But I do want to see this money and think about how I'm going to spend it. Ken starts kind of playing along with it like, all right, yeah, what are you going to do with that? What are your plans?
Ping pong table.
She says, I've never seen so much money in my life, and spends like an hour looking away from him. Not a good idea, because Ken, even though he's not going to get his boat ride with her, has a plan to take care of her.
He gets that boat ride.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's exactly actually how I worded it too, is he's brandishing the champagne bottle, he's wrapping it up, getting it ready for its moment of collision with her skull. And in the end, she doesn't agree to it, but she still goes on that boat ride and gets dumped into the lake with the bottles of champagne.
He also has this line before he kills her when Lily says something like, I wish my husband were here to see all of this money. We never had anything like this. And Ken says, well, this is the second best thing or something like that, and implying basically like join him in death then.
But doesn't immediately hit her when he says that. He lets her turn around and process it.
So this guy, on top of already murdering his writing partner, now murders this innocent woman essentially, first by making her cook him dinner and then by taunting her.
So Lily's dead. She's at the bottom of the lake, and his final touch is he capsizes the boat. He flips it over and swims back to shore.
It's kind of impressive.
Yeah, it's not bad.
He started rocking that boat. Don't tip the boat over. And it surprised me. I didn't know what he was going for. I thought he stumbled at first.
We get a little bit. It's nothing exactly like it, but there's shades now of what we saw in the Barry Mayfield episode, where collateral damage murders, which doesn't usually happen in Columbo, he does have to commit one more than what we signed up for originally. But Barry Mayfield, of course, has like 9 people or something in his episode.
But much like Barry Mayfield, as he goes along, Ken can't execute with the same precision because there's no plan.
Because he didn't have the time to do all the premeditation on it. This particular murder, as we're about to find out, does not impress Columbo very much compared to that first one. So the next day, Ken confirms that Lily's body was found. He's kind of hanging around, like skulking around the area in his fisherman best is what I put down.
Yeah, I put little fisherman outfit. He's got a white scarf and a dictator's hat.
Yeah.
So back at his cabin, who do we have dropping in but our dear lieutenant, who's pretending to be scoping out the area for an upcoming vacation? I put down there's no way he'll ever take. I don't just mean here, I just mean at all.
I don't think he would like it.
No. Columbo on vacation is not something that even computes.
He's a city rat. Like, he's a New York subway rat that gets in your way and eats other rats. And he's trying to be a country rat here, and it just doesn't work.
And what if there are no murders to solve?
Yeah.
Ken is not fooled at all, and he gets an opportunity here to be like, I don't think these houses are in your price range, Lieutenant.
Yeah, twice here, Ken is such a dick. For no reason, just blindsides Columbo with these personal insults.
The best part of it all, though, is that Columbo is, like, devastated. He's like, you don't think I can get a cabin here?
Oh, man, Mrs. Columbo is going to be real upset when I tell her we can't come out here.
She's going to put a cigarette on me. She's going to be so mad.
And she knows I like that, though.
He does pivot smoothly by saying, hey, at least the trip up here was nice. Except for that bottleneck on the way here. What was that about? And says, I don't know. It's like, I think the local woman drowned, something like that. Something happened, something bad. Columbo says, oh, did you know her? And says, no, I just got groceries from the store. I didn't really talk to her much.
It should be noted that Ken this whole time has his package facing Columbo as he props his leg up on the bench of the patio, like one of our former bosses, I guess you could say, at a bowling alley we worked at.
Columbo says, I just wonder why she would do that. She went out by herself on a boat in the middle of the night? Ken says, yeah, I do that all the time here.
Everyone does it. Midnight boat rides.
This is why you'll never vacation here, Columbo. You don't understand our midnight boating habits.
Columbo gets set to leave, and this is more of those shots I was talking about earlier where they just kind of go at it subtly. And Ken starts by one of those really kind of uncalled for ones where he's like, oh, Lieutenant, I'd give you a bathing suit, but you don't really seem like the athletic type. So there's probably no point in that.
And this is one of those, like, don't throw stones from a glass house situations.
And Columbo retorts with, oh, what's the nightlife here? Like, what's it like? Because I tried to call you to tell you I was on the way last night and you weren't here. So what were you doing last night?
It would be really funny if Columbo lost it, which is, by the way, an actual great retort from Columbo, but I wish he would have, for some reason, taken this one personally. And after Ken says he's not an athlete, Columbo just be like, yeah, you don't look so great either, you old man. Like, just because Columbo is younger.
In this case, absolutely.
I have always wanted to do like a Columbo thing where just one more thing, except the just one more thing is just an insult.
Like just one more thing. Fuck off, you odious footlicker.
Yeah, something like that.
Just one more thing with that. If you're dressed like that, you look like a fucking actual turkey.
So Columbo is going to try to piece together what Ken hasn't been telling him about what's going on here, because he knows. He knows something else Ken is mixed up in, is involved with the original murder, and he's going to get to the heart of it. So he kind of heads to the general store on his own. He passed the gathered police, the local police. Those yokels, they don't really know what they're doing. So he doesn't pay too much attention, but he does introduce himself, and he gets permission to poke around.
This is a great scene because he first just goes about his business, like eavesdropping, seeing if he can get any information, eating food out of stuff just in the convenience store.
Yeah, it's like candy jars that he's touching all the candy in.
Yeah.
No.
And when the cop asks, he's like, who are you? And the uniform cop, he's like, and he just mumbles nothing and then Lieutenant and L.A. And the cop's like, oh, okay. But it's another great Peter Falk scene where he seems legitimately surprised anyone would be asking him why he's there.
I also like the cops that are there. There's like a journalist or something asking questions, or maybe just townspeople, like, what was the body? You know, who was it, et cetera, et cetera. And the cop answering questions is like, I don't know. We didn't even look at this stuff. Who cares? She's fine. She died.
Yeah, one of them says, oh, no, there's no way there could be foul play.
The local police are clearly not really sure what's going on here. Columbo is only mildly interested. You hear something about a bruise on her head with the press or whoever it is we were talking about asking the cops. And
the other guy's like, oh, probably got hit by the boat.
It didn't look like something that happens from a champagne bottle. They suspect, she just fell out of the boat and that's how she knocked her head in.
We got another killer boat on the loose.
Honestly, Columbo doesn't really seem like he cares that much what they think. He's kind of only half paying attention to them. He is listening because he seems like he picks up everything, but he's more interested in the store and just kind of wandering around it. Okay, I don't really know what he finds when he goes back to like the home area. Something
That's
rolls
where he finds
out.
the champagne cork.
That's what that is. I couldn't even tell, and I was too close to the end to even stop and look at that closer.
Yeah, it looked like a tiny chef's hat. But that was the cork.
He says it shortly after. I wouldn't have known.
Agreed.
Okay, so he's coming up with little clues when he wanders around, and there is one that we know. Corks do play very prominently in this episode.
Both in terms of like turns of phrase and literally.
Ken blew his cork a couple times.
And here the cork blew it for him.
There's more too, is that on the way out, this is like, I guess, the final nail in the coffin in Columbo's mind. He sees Ken's signed copy of the book that he gifted Lily at the beginning, and he reads the inscription where it says, "To my dear beloved Lily, who I know very well and I've met several times, and I murdered everyone."
But also I told Columbo I don't know her at all.
This is kind of the perfect like final thing to seal the deal for Columbo because it's the ultimate sign of Ken's hubris and also Ken being disingenuous, like being all syrupy with this woman at the convenience store for no reason with no intent. And that kind of comes back to bite him.
And here Columbo seems like he's kind of had it with Ken too, like, oh, that piece of shit. 'Cause the next scene, he's coming out with everything to Joanna.
And this is another one of those really quick cuts that feel modern.
Immediately. He's in the middle of basically telling Joanna, this guy is horrible. He killed your husband. He's bad. Give me something that I can use against him, Joanna, because all I've got, as he tells her, is I've got a bunch of little things, but there's nothing really concrete. Like I don't have anything that can stand in a court of law to put him away, but I know he did it.
You see, Joanna, I've got the M&Ms, I've got the brownie bites, I've got the Heath bars and the Snickers pieces and the Twix. I've got all those things, but I ain't got the vanilla ice cream that you mix in with the machine at Sonic, and then it turns out you got yourself a Blizzard or whatever.
What we need is a strong base to hold together all of these candies. The candies are metaphorical for bits of anecdotal evidence I've accumulated in the previous few days.
I'm just picturing Joanna's eyes growing wide with horror as Columbo tries to use this metaphor on her and is just not following him at all.
I eat a lot of candy, Joanna.
I think, though, that Joanna, instead of saying, really? I've known Ken for years, when confronted with this information, she should have said, yeah, that sounds about right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no way you would have known this guy for years and not thought, he's up to something.
Just as smarmy as he was with her that we've seen is enough to make you go, this is a scumbag guy.
Yeah. She just likes him because they've known each other, but not because he's a good guy.
And doesn't even really like him, just kind of like has tolerated him, is willing to, but clearly
she's
knows.
Yoko Ono, remember? She's pushing him apart.
It's like how in another great classic television show we covered, Home Improvement, how Tim Allen's friend
Scooter
McGavin, you know, they've known him for a long time, but it's time to go. That friendship must end.
And in this case, Jim would have founded a band with wings.
He would have.
In my scenario, but he died.
He's dead.
So is Paul McCartney. He's actually been replaced by a replica.
And Linda McCartney in this instance is, of course, Joanna.
And vegetarian.
Is Joanna also? We don't know.
I only saw strawberries in the
We
show.
don't even know if she ate those eggs or not.
While Columbo is talking to Joanna and telling her, here's what he did, here's how he did it, and here's why you need to tell me more so that I can put it all together, he comes across a piece of paper that he kind of mumbles. Jack and Jill going up the hill, and on the piece of paper is a question, did Jack murder Jill? Joanna says, oh, that's just another one of Jim's story ideas. He was always leaving those all around the house. He wrote down story ideas and left them everywhere, all over, because he's just this man who had all these ideas.
Who knows what some of them might reveal?
I could tell you that one revealed a bad story idea.
That was a pretty bad one.
Almost the absence of an idea.
Columbo adds the list of reasons to suspect Ken to her, because she's still kind of on the fence. He says, listen to this. He withdrew $15,000 right before the trip to his cabin yesterday, and he put it right back in today. That had to have been money that he was going to give Lily, because Joanna's like, well, why would he have killed Lily if he did this? What's that got to do with him? And Columbo says, she saw something. He was trying to shut her up, so he killed her, and then he put the money back in. That explains why he would have killed Lily. He urges Joanna, just tell me anything you can think of so we can put this thing to rest. The scene fades with Joanna explaining that Jim was constantly thinking of story ideas, which we covered, while Ken never, even brought the books up unless he was on TV. Because again, Ken, not really in it for the art itself.
He doesn't love Mrs. Melville for the art that she is.
No.
This is enough to give Columbo, I think, some kind of an idea here. We're not yet privy. We don't know what's in his head. But between Joanna saying this about Jim leaving ideas all over the place and Columbo finding that little piece of information about Jack killing Jill on the hill, he's got something he's working with here. He just needs to go to the office and put the last piece together. So in our final scene, that's where we are. We're Jim's office. We start with the outside, though. It's Ken impatiently waiting for his stuff to be moved out, being an asshole to everyone, like Ken does. He goes up to the driver, the mover truck, and says, like, you were here to move my stuff. Where is it? Why am I still here? Why can't I have what I want? I'm Ken. And the guy says, hey, buddy, because he's one of those I say New York guys, but this is California. But he says, like, I don't make the calls here, okay? There are two guys inside, and until they leave, I can't move your stuff out.
This guy very much felt like an East Coast guy.
He did.
He's very awesome. He's one of my favorite
Yeah.
characters. He's like, listen, buddy, I'm just a freaking driver. I don't do that shit. Check with the idiots inside.
So Ken goes in to get to the bottom of this because, well, two guys, what's going on in there?
Where's the girl in a pizza place?
You guys know what's going on in there, which is Columbo seated at the desk reading a Mrs. Melville book.
Just in the power position. He's like, I got you, and I'm going to be a little theatrical now.
He practically does like the chair swivel to reveal himself.
Ken greets Columbo as rudely as he has yet and says, Columbo! Columbo goes right for the big guns. Honestly, there's not much fanfare here. Columbo just says, I'm here to arrest you. Columbo admits he knew Ken had done it right away from the beginning, which we could tell, and then lists out all those little things we talked about.
Right before he goes, I've really got you. I love how he just flat out says that.
And at this point, Ken's like, no, you don't.
Ken's great because Ken's like, oh, scuff. So what do you want to continue a little? Or?
Let me just tell you how dumb it is. Come on, let's hear it. So he lists those little things he was talking about with Joanna, the mail, the not flying back, the things that aren't going to hold up in court. Ken knows that, and he acts like, well, if that's all you got nothing. I'm not that worried. He also mentions the money withdrawal, the signed book. Ken says, well, this is still thank you for putting this together. This is all very entertaining.
Oh, very good, Mr. Stupid. You're stupid.
Columbo says, you were in San Diego when Jim died, but so was he, and I can prove it. And they have a little back and forth. The concept here is that Columbo has found in this very office the thing that will incriminate Ken and prove that this alibi plan that he hatched was really not his idea at all, or so we think. And this is the nail in the coffin that proves that Ken has actually done this whole thing as part of a big murder plot. I have about a minute of back and forth between Ken and Columbo here that functions as this episode's gotcha moment. So I wanted to include that. We can all have a listen at it.
Mrs. Melville, she'd have been very disappointed.
Well, come on, get to the climax, Lieutenant. You're talking to a writer.
Am I? That's not what I heard. And that's the key, that you're not a writer. When Mrs. Ferris told me that you didn't contribute to the writing, that her husband did all the work,
That's a lie.
I had to say to myself, how could a man with no talent for mysteries make up such a clever murder? If you were that ingenious, you'd be able to write your own books. Is this your partner's handwriting? Well, I think I can prove it is. Maybe I ought to read this to you. Idea for a Melville book, perfect alibi. A wants to kill B. Drives B to a remote house and has him call his wife in city. Tells her he's working late at the office. Bang, bang. Sound familiar? That's the plot you used. Practically word for word. Should I read some more?
No.
Officer, with this, I think I got a conviction, don't you?
I started that a little earlier than I should have just because I wanted to get Columbo's burn in there on, hey, you're talking to a writer, am I?
A couple of really great burns. I also, when he's presenting this evidence right before he says, I've got the evidence and not the witness, you killed the witness. He says that so directly.
I wanted to put that in there too. I wanted like 2 minutes of that.
Oh, the whole scene's great.
So Ken is caught. He knows he's caught. It always ends this way in the end, no matter how ridiculous they are, no matter how smug. By the last scene, and we don't get much of it with Ken here, but he realizes that, okay, he's done. he does have one final little line there. He's like, I really had you going there for a little bit, didn't I?
It was so good.
He also adds that this was his story idea.
Yeah, the irony of the whole thing is this one good idea.
And he admits, he says it that way, my one good idea. It's the only time he kind of acknowledges that he's not a real writer.
I guess he might as well, since, it's clear that his life as a free man is over. You might as well admit also you're talentless.
He's headed to the Slammer, the big house.
It's one of the best parts of Columbo because, for example, when we did the Adrian Carcini wine one, he has his moment in the car with Donald Pleasance.
Now that one is just next level amazing.
It's so good. And I love this little bit where he's got him and they finally are like, fuck it. He's got me. It's
really satisfying.
Let's toast to one another.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that makes that wine episode so unique and special is how he's actually kind of sad. He's bittersweet about putting Adrian away. But usually it's more like this where he's like, you fucker, now it's my turn to win and you're going to go to jail. So what do you guys think?
Well, one thing I have to do is present my evidence that Columbo read all of the Mrs. Melville novels.
Oh, yeah, let's hear it.
This episode ends with him getting the arresting his man, and then he immediately picks the book back up to the point where he's reading it as he walks out the door. He's not even watching where he's going. He loves these books.
I bet they're good.
Well, I bet they are
good.
good.
Jim was a good author.
I know. R.I.P., man. We lost one of our best fiction authors.
We're never going to hear Live and Let Die.
No, not anymore. Because again, he's the Paul McCartney.
In my scenario.
And Live and Let Die came out in the 80s.
How do you guys feel about, if you think back to the two we watched, how does this fit in with those? Like in terms of your personal rating system?
Your personal favorite is the wine one. Is that the best one? Maybe not. This might be the best one. As far as structure and how the murder was done and how Columbo figured it out and all the positives, this might be the top one for me. But the thing is they're all 1A, 1B, 1C. They're all so
fun
good
to watch. Like
this is an enjoyable show.
That's what makes it really hard to pick it apart because this one is really good. But I do also believe that the Adrian Carcini episode, the wine episode, is my favorite of the three we've watched because it just has that little extra. Because that's kind of what differentiates a lot of these is there's just a little more that you like. Because I've never really watched, at least in the first probably 4 seasons of Columbo, I don't think I've seen one where I legitimately didn't like it or felt bored or unentertained.
I think it's pretty much agreed universally that the ones that we've covered are kind of the cream of the crop. There's others that are also at the top of the list, but I didn't really mess around and pick ones that were more middling or anything. I just went with the ones I love the most. And these are just kind of hard not to love. There's not much about them that you're like, I don't know about that. It seems like for the most part, it's kind of perfection.
And most of the qualms we had, we were able to sort of answer internally as being this is a show from the 70s or it makes sense with what the show is.
It's nitpicking when we do that.
Just because we feel weird saying only positive things.
We don't do that a lot on Boob Tube Boys.
Probably be the same next week, though.
I think we can all agree for various reasons that is a very good thing to do Columbo for one of our rewinds, right?
Absolutely.
We needed to. It was yours was also an early one too, Brian. Like we had to revisit one that's like the first episode. We wanted to go back and talk more about those. I hope we get a chance in the future to talk about Columbo again. You guys should see if there's a Christmas special we can do.
That's actually a really good
something
point.
like that. So it's not easy to have found us. You must have enjoyed our content. If you have listened to us and you want more, we're other places on the internet. I'm just going to throw some out there. I'm a little rusty. I haven't hosted in a while, so I'm not used to spitting these out. We're on YouTube. If you're like, hey, I love podcasts, but I really would rather listen to them on YouTube, you can go to YouTube, search Boob Tube Boys. We're there. There's an Instagram page. We are kind of all individually on Blue Sky. I did create an account. I haven't done anything with it, but I am going to be SpenHen314.
Official.
Yeah, it's just I haven't. There's no branding, but I'm there, and I will do more with it over time.
Is it because you like the pi number, the 3.14?
That's what it is. It's 100% that.
So it's SpenHen Pie.
SpenHen Pie, just look for me just like that. Van is something on Blue Sky. I think you're just Boo 2 Inc., right?
Boo 2 Inc., that's right.
And Brian's Loud Guitar Brian.
Same as always.
Yeah, he's that on everything. So if you want to find Brian, it's just Loud Guitar Brian, anywhere you look. We have a website, boot2inc.com. Brian always says boot with a U, I-N-C. You can just go there and find whatever you want about us. And additionally, we have a lot of extra content that is free to all. It's patreon.com/boo2inc. That wraps it up for my Boob Tube Boys Rewind, but we're not quite done with the project overall. We've got a little more to cover in that. For that information, I'm going to toss it to Van. Van, take the wheel.
Holy cow, what a wild episode of Columbo. The part with the animals, the part with the water balloons.
I know.
Blows my mind.
It's even better than I thought it would be.
Way better. I give it a 10 out of 10. But that's not the only episode of TV we're covering. No, it's my turn next. And this is the final round of Boob Tube Boys Rewind. And I have a question to ask you, gentlemen.
Who let the dogs out?
You stand up for this one. Yeah, get this here. There comes a time in every man's life when he knows he's got opponents across the board and he's got to step up to the plate. He's got to reach deep inside of his macho body and he's got to rip out the Hulkster. He's got to rip out Big Van Vader. He's got to rip out, Ric Flair, and he's got to show him how a man does things.
You're not going to believe this possibly, but I almost did this, if it's what I think you're doing. Maybe you're not.
I don't think so, brother. Because you don't own the show that I own, which is when I meet you out on that beach, brother. That beach where David Hasselhoff is scampering around and he's checking out eels. You're not going to be able to withstand the power of the vandalizer or escape the Van's sharpshooter, which I've decided is my finisher. Because we, ladies and gentlemen, or gentlemen, we will be covering Baywatch, Season 6, Episode 15, titled Bash at the Beach. Now, here's the thing. At the time, WCW as a company had just gotten Hulk Hogan. And it was a big deal, except it wasn't because people were tired of Hulk Hogan. Doesn't matter. They teamed up to make this episode. And essentially what the plot of it is, here, I'll read it from the IMDb description. CJ rescues pro wrestler Hulk Hogan, who then tells her, Cody, and the rest of the Baywatch team that he's in town with fellow wrestler Randy Savage in trying to prevent the Venice Boys Youth Center that is faced with being closed down from his arch rival, pro wrestler Ric Flair, and his gang, Kevin Sullivan and Big Van Vader.
Fuck.
Flair then challenges Hogan and Savage into a grudge wrestling match for control of the youth center. Meanwhile, Stephanie is dating Mitch's old friend, Tom Morella.
What?
It's not him. It's not him.
I was about to have childhood overload.
No. A dermatologist who diagnoses her with melanoma, which turns Stephanie into a nervous wreck. And let me tell you right now, I've seen this episode. That B subplot does not belong in that episode.
I can't wait to watch this thing.
I'm going to sit down.
For obvious reasons.
So again, I've watched this, and we all know the actors on Baywatch are not James Cromwell. They're not high-quality actors,
well, maybe
right?
in this episode they will be.
But when you see them next to Hulk Hogan and Macho Man Randy Savage and Ric Flair, they look like fucking Golden Globe Oscar winners.
I can't wait to discuss the very clear evolution in wrestlers being actors.
It's wild. This episode is so much fun. Brian, you're going to lose it.
Yeah, I'm going to watch it when I get home.
You notoriously haven't been a wrestling fan like Brian, or even to my extent, but you were a little bit when you were younger.
At one point.
Do you recognize those guys? Do you know all of them?
I know Hulk Hogan. I know Ric Flair. I don't know anyone else.
Do you know Big Van Vader?
No, not at least
I bet you'd recognize him, but that's about it.
He might be familiar once I see him.
I cannot wait for it. It'll be a lot of fun. Spencer, back to you.
So on the way out, I want to hear, you guys have a choice. You guys can each do one. It doesn't matter. I want to hear either just one more thing, Columbo, with an insult as you're parting, or I want to hear you perhaps tell me what Mrs. Melville might sound like if she were actually talking. You can pick either one.
Oh, just one more thing. You're a bell end.
I don't even have a bell end, imbecile.
That's exactly what she sounds like.
I knew it was going to be
that. It's exactly right.
Yeah, it's got to be. And the seed feigns with the seed feigns.
That sounds like poetic. Ere the seed feigns as Columbo comes over the hill.